This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39. And together we have a shared vision for success in our business and personal lives. Many successful people have started small just like us, but very few of them documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others people's, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we will be discussing how to handle social situations that you aren't interested in entertaining. How do you tell someone you don't want to go to that event without coming across as rude? How can you notice when others are sending you the same message, and how do you respond to it? All of these mannerisms we'll be discussing today, and we'll answer the question, when is sugarcoating better than brutal honesty? But first, we'd like to give a quick business update and a personal life update for our future selves to kind of guesstimate where we're at in our lives today. So, what do you have for business updates?
Lots of digital media item work.
Yeah.
Lots of posters and sheets and idea generation.
Yep.
A lot of revamping, going through, buttoning up documents, kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's, I guess, on a few things. So, looking good in that respect. Podcast stuff is ready to post for next week, which is nice.
It's awesome.
Done and dusted. We have some new rebranding of the posts regarding the direct-to-camera content on Vision 79 as well. We have some new shirts coming in, too.
I have noticed already that there's a larger engagement boost with the new, theming.
Yeah.
Which I think is huge. And I can't wait to bring that theming into the actual recording with, multi-camera setup and green screen and stuff like that. But until then, I think that thumbnails are a really great way of getting somebody to click on a video regardless of the value that's inside the video, you know? So, this could be solid gold, but you would never know looking at a thumbnail from behind the Walmart, you know?
Right.
But if you put a green background in there, then it doesn't matter where you are. You still get the same content because you're clicking on the video. So I'm really happy that we made those changes.
Yeah, I think those are the heavy general hitters, but if you want to detail in a little bit or talk about a few other things.
We've done a lot of general planning. The few weeks ahead, you've got significantly more time to get some work done. So we're kind of taking a look at what you can get accomplished in those weeks while I'm stuck with the regular grind. And we've done a lot of digital media work.
Yes.
I think both of those are really important. And dude, the further we get into it, the more I'm thinking to myself, I have answered the same question. When my parents asked me, I picked them up from the airport the other day. When they asked me, what are you doing tonight? I picked them up on a Friday night. They're like, what are you doing on a Friday night? And I'm like, oh, working. And they were like, well, what were you doing before that? And I was like, well, I was at work, at my job. And they were like, oh. And they're like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, probably working. And they were like, what are you working on? And I told them, and it's the same answer I've given them for 8 months now. And there are other people who have cranked this out in such a shorter amount of time. And for a while, I was thinking, man, are we really shit at this? Are we inefficient? But I think it's actually just the fact that we're putting way more effort into it than anyone else has. And I'm so excited to see that effort pay off.
I had the same conversation with someone else at Kraken today. And they were like, do you have days off? I was like, or they asked me, how many days a week do you work? And I was like, every day.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, what about work? And I was like, well, I go to my job 5 days a week, but I'm working on my laptop or something 7 days a week.
Right.
And they're like, you don't take days off or something? I was like, nope.
Really?
I was like, I take small breaks here and there.
Yeah.
But they were like, you should take 2 days off a month. And I was like, 2 days off a month.
That's gay as fuck.
Would be 24 days a year, which is over 3 weeks, which is over 5% of my year.
Yeah.
So, no thanks. In 20 years, that would be an entire year that I wasted.
Yeah.
Wasted.
What's wrong?
To each their own, but
what's wrong with that sentence is they're passing their own assumptions onto you.
Right, exactly.
I need 2 days off a week, so you should do it too. I really make a physical intention to try and get the words like you should out of my vocabulary unless someone's asking for advice.
Yep.
And even then, there's better ways to do it, but that's a personal goal of mine is to get you should out of my vernacular.
It's a good one.
The other one that I have is similar on the new rebranding for the Vision 79 podcast. There's something in rowing that we call a novice curve, which is when someone's brand new to the sport, the first time they sit on an erg, they're fucking terrible, right? But over their first year, they make huge gains very rapidly. So you can drop your race time from 8 minutes and 20 seconds down to like 7 minutes in your first year. And you're like, oh my God, I just took a minute and a half off my time. At this rate, I'll be the fastest man alive in 3 years. And then that curve starts to plateau out. Yeah. You're familiar. The last like 10% is impossible, right? But yeah, I've noticed that just looking back on our first couple of videos, I really love how we did this podcast, because the way that we do everything is like throw everything we have at it. Absolutely just fucking crush it from the gate, right? Like the business that we're doing now. It's our first time and we're going to try and fucking nail it the first time. But our first podcast was like, let's just sit down and turn a camera on with like a couple of our favorite quotes and see what happens, right? Mm-hmm. And there was very little effort and very, very little thought put into it.
No structure.
No structure.
At all. We didn't even communicate about what we were going to talk about.
Yeah, for like the first 10.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I remember I brought it up. I was like, hey, do you want to like collaborate? And you're like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, I feel like it would be helpful. And we're like, we could try it. And then we tried it, and then it kind of worked. And then we kind of did it, kind of didn't. And then we got on it. And now we're like fully collaborating days ahead.
Yeah.
Days ahead. But
yeah. It's progress. I think 100%. What I was trying to capture when I told you I didn't want to collaborate was I like the raw reaction of when I ask a question, you don't know what the question is, so your answer is legitimate. But having topics to speak about to theme the episodes is important. But what I really love is that for our business, there's not really record of like, oh, we did it shit the first time. But for the podcast, you can go back and be like, wow, our first episode really was like genuine novice from us, which we don't normally see because we do so much prep for everything.
Right.
But I really love seeing the progression through the episodes, and especially with where we're at now. And I think that with this most recent video, with the structure, with the collaboration, with the set pieces that we have now figured out, and with the thumbnail, I think that we're getting close to the end of the novice curve of like rapid growth over our first 30 episodes. Mm-hmm. And I think that the next 100 are going to be like roughly the same until we can get subscriber counts up and advertisements and start paying for editors, multi-camera setups. But I think that we're starting to enter the lonely chapter of it's going to be the same for a little while, and we're going to enjoy it still. We're going to bring a lot of
I still enjoy it.
Right. It's just not going to be like new poster frames every week.
Well, the thing is like I don't even look at, the views very often. I'll check like TikTok here and there, and when you bring it up, I'll check it, right? But it's like, that's not why I do it. So it doesn't bother me whether people listen or not.
Right. I check it a lot.
I like it when people listen.
Yeah.
Shout out to the people who come up to me at the cover bar and, let me know that they watched the latest podcast. But, it's not like a requirement for me to continue doing it.
Yeah. I messaged a rowing buddy of mine the other week because I was going through my contacts list. And I was like, hey, man, how you doing? Just checking in. He was like, I'd ask how you're doing, but I get an update every week from your podcast. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know you listen. So Zap, if you're listening, buddy, I love you. But I think that I check the views pretty frequently because I would really like to get at least one sponsor, because it doesn't take much money to get an editor to do the processing for us.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of time off our plate. So I'm really focused on trying to get the numbers up to there. We're on our way. And I had a cool idea while we were sitting here prior, which is we sit in these racing suits every week. People are like, oh, do you have a racing podcast? And I'm like, well, kind of. It's about a lot of other things too, but racing's a part of it because we love cars. You can't take it out of our lives, right? And my car is now fixed. That's one of my only life notes, is that my clutch is worn in, so I can drive the shit out of my car again. And I have missed it so much. Every time my car goes down for service, I'm like, maybe I should get a Miata or like something that's a little more reliable and handles a bit better. And then I yam on the throttle in this Camaro, and I'm like, fuck all that. I just go fast, real loud, real straight, real left. But I had an idea, which was we should pick milestones in our subscriber count in which we go racing and record it. So like our first 100, our first 1,000, our first 10,000 subscribers, like at the milestones, we reward ourselves for sticking with it and our audience for sticking with us, like going racing and talking about like the stuff that we tell stories about.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I like it.
This is Sanders' first time hearing it. Mm-hmm. So that's my business update. And then the clutch is my life update. I also learned how Australians say no. They say nar. They go now.
Yes, you did learn that. You told me that earlier this week.
Right. It was to say car.
Fascinating.
I'm going to start speaking Australian. I saw a TikTok of a Russian woman who didn't speak English. She got married to a Jamaican man and moved to Jamaica. So she's a Russian woman with a Russian accent speaking Jamaican English. And I want to be that person so badly. So I'm going to start incorporating Australian into my language to throw people off. People are going to be like, where are you from? And I'll be like, Melbourne. And they'll be like, really? And I go, yeah, Melbourne, Florida.
There you go.
So that concludes my life update. Are you ready to get into the main theme, or do you have life updates?
No, I mean, nothing really life related.
All right, let's
just
get into
work on my laptop and vibe.
Attaboy.
That is my life. I like it.
Attaboy. So our main theme today is covering when is sugarcoating better than being blunt. And I want to introduce this by saying we often struggle with balancing our distraction-free work with too many social interactions. And that's probably because we oftentimes work at kava bars. We enjoy the environment there. But we get wrapped into conversations pretty frequently because we're friends with a lot of people who go there. And most people go there to socialize. We happen to go there to work. I like people, etc. But that has several benefits, including learning more about the industry, becoming members of a community, and sparking new brainstorming ideas through conversation with new people. I enjoy all of that. But we're often subject to dead-end conversations, offers for help, and pleas for help that are an active hindrance to our workflow, both in and out of the bar. We're going to discuss how to categorize these interactions and how to handle them effectively. That's the main theme of this podcast. So, do you have any generalizations to talk about for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, let's dive into it. Yeah. I'll let you lead.
I've got some. Before we launch into our first segment, I just want to say that I feel a social pressure to be polite or to lie about how I feel to, in other words, let a person down easy. So like if someone invites me to something, like I recently had a coworker who left my office like a year ago. She was like, oh, we're having a Christmas party this year. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'll let you know closer to the event. I'm not going.
Right.
I know today I'm not going, but I didn't say it because I wanted to be kind of polite. But I feel that social pressure because I'm still not totally comfortable telling people flat out no, yet. But that's something that I'm working towards because I feel like over text, it can be misconstrued so easily. But I think that everybody in middle school and high school, they want to be liked, right? And a way to do that is to be easy and non-confrontational, right?
Yes. I also think that there is a balance of you never know when the people around you may be able to help you in return. Right. And so that's an important thing to factor in when you're thinking about how you interact with others. You know, you might be in a bad mood that day and you might, brush someone off or tell them to go fuck themselves when they ask you for help on something or whatever. Right. But that action may have consequences down the line that you didn't realize when you need help or you need advice or something else or someone to talk to or hanging out with or whatever. So
And that's go ahead.
Yeah. I just think there's a balance between, maintaining those friendships and relationships and also being able to get your stuff done. And I think that you can put yourself in positions to where you are less approachable, but not directly less approachable. Passively less approachable so that you can get your work done. And then you can also passively make yourself more approachable so that you can build those bonds if that's something you're looking to do that day or whatever.
Yeah. I really strive to be the guy that everyone is familiar with and has only positive interactions with, but who people know is busy. Like, I don't want to bother him unless I have to. So in middle school and high school, everybody wants to be liked. We even still have a little bit of that. I think at my core, I don't really care if I'm liked. I really only want to be liked by people who like me for me. And so a way to kind of make that clear is if I'm confronted with a stranger, I don't want them to like me for the sake of it. I only want them to like me and engage in conversation with me and want to be friends with me if they actually do genuinely want to be friends with me. So I'll never enter a conversation with the ploy of, man, I hope this person likes me. I'll enter a conversation, and if they end up liking me, that's awesome. But if they don't, that's cool. I'm not bothered by it. And I feel like a lot of people get caught up in, are they going to like me or not? And it's a problem if they don't.
I thought about this week, actually. Everyone always says, oh, you can't please everyone, blah, 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 right? And yes, that's obviously true, but I don't think that really solidifies for a lot of people. I think a lot of people still chase trying to please everyone.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it in my particular case, in respect to the presidential candidates, right? There is such a wealth of people in the United States with a million different opinions, right? There is zero chance that one person is able to encompass even a solid 50% of the populace.
Yeah.
There's just no way. You have to figure out who, suits you in more regards than the other person, right?
Right.
And I felt like that just kind of sent it home for me. It was it's really impossible to please everyone. It really is. So you might as well focus on pleasing yourself and then just being a good human being to the people around you and just work from there.
Yeah.
I thought about that this week. So it's, obviously fitting that we bring it up, but also funny.
Yeah. I learned this. I don't want to be liked by everybody. I only want to be liked by the people who like me as a character from a previous relationship in which we broke up because the girl wasn't interested in me anymore. And I tried so hard to get her to be interested in me again because I wanted her to like me, until I realized, hey, man, the keynote, the function of a working relationship is that you like each other. So if that person doesn't like me, why would I want to be with them? Because it's just going to end up in a non-functional relationship. So I started falling into this weird zone of, well, I only want to date people who like me. And because of that, I'm not really being outwardly like, what's the word for it?
Like being yourself?
No, I'm being myself too much. It's to the point where I'm not really being romantic with anybody. I'm not showing any affection. That's the point. I'm not showing any affection to anybody because I only want to be involved with people who like me. And so I wouldn't give out any affection, therefore I wouldn't get any back. And so I just was alone for a while. And I was like, oh, maybe I should show something if I want to get a relationship again.
Fair enough.
But I feel that in-person message sending is way easier than over text, which goes back to this person inviting me to their Christmas party. It's over text, and I feel way more apprehensive to be blunt over text because of how it can be misconstrued. And a lot of the points I have here are on how to get your message across without being misunderstood, because that's the fundamental problem with poor communication. But an easy way out of this is I just don't accept texts from everybody, right? So if I don't want to be bothered, I just don't accept text. And then in person, if somebody comes up to me and I don't want to be bothered, I won't.
Don't accept, you mean you don't respond, or you have them blocked?
I don't respond.
Got it.
Yeah. And that's to select people. It doesn't happen very frequently. Usually I'll give them like a, hey, no, whatever. I've got stuff on it later on. But generally speaking, I can really easily flip my phone over and ignore a conversation. But if someone comes to me in person, I won't make eye contact, or I'll cut them off and tell them I'm super busy at the moment. And critically, I'll be honest. Like if they're being a bother, I'll be like, hey, I'm so sorry. Like I'm really busy right now. I will get back to you. Just give me some time. And when they say, oh, I'm sorry, like I know you're busy, I try not to say, oh, it's not a problem, like you're okay. I try to go thank you or you're welcome, because it's not okay. And I'm doing you a favor.
I say I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, something like that.
It's really funny. Today, our friend with the new BMW with the fuel issue, he came up to me as I was leaving Kraken, and he was like, you want to hear something funny? And I was like, no. And he was like, oh man. And I was like, is it about your car? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I definitely don't want to hear about it. And he was like, aw.
It's not funny.
And then I looked at him and I went, well, I have to be polite, so tell me anyway. And so he told me, and we fist bumped after. Like, it was more joking than anything, but it had like a grain of seriousness in it, where I was just like, hey man, like, just fix your fuel pump. Like, I can't give advice from what I've already given. Like, I've already given you the answer. I can't continue to like reiterate this pointless conversation, in my opinion. Right? But it was actually funny. He forgot his trunk was electronic lock. He disconnected the battery to try and reset his iDrive, shut the trunk, couldn't get it open because it's an electronic latch, so he had to jump the car from the front to get it to open up. So that was pretty funny. I've only made that mistake once. It was at work, I think, a long time ago. And from that point on, I was like, definitely remember whether you have an actual real key latch or not. Because a lot of those modern cars, they don't have a fucking key latch.
Yeah, and the seats don't fold down.
Yeah, so exactly.
Yeah. I think generally when people come up to me with stuff like that, I'm really quick to assume that someone's asking me for help. And I very rarely accept requests from help in person. If I don't want to do it, I'll honestly tell them and I'll be like, I'm too busy or I'm not interested. But in order to not seem like a dick, I then put them in touch with somebody who might be able to or might be willing, so that them reaching out to me wasn't a total waste of time, dead end. And I don't seem like a dick, because I don't mean to be, but I recognize that as we previously stated, socially, it's acceptable to just say that you're busy or say that you can't. But to blatantly say, like, I don't want to do that, it sounds more rude than it really means to be. So to present that I'm not trying to be rude, I'll try and find an alternative solution for them. That's how I handle the in-person questions.
Yeah, fair enough. I sometimes have a hard time saying no directly, but I try to iterate the fact that I am busy and my time is limited.
Right.
So I might be able to help them at some point, but I'm not sure right now. So I try to iterate that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they continue bugging me and it's rough, but it is what it is.
But we're working out solutions to that. That's what this whole podcast is. So that's our introduction.
Fair enough.
We'll get into segment 1 here, which is what is a mannerism. We'll define exactly what we're talking about before we get into how to actually apply them. But I have my definition here as a mannerism is a habitual gesture or way of speaking or behaving. We can manipulate our mannerisms to send the same message in different manners, hence the term mannerism. So some examples are language selection, facial expressions, hand gestures, posturing, and fidgeting. So I have an example here. I'm going to say roughly the same message, but in different ways about your driving. Pretend we're at a track and you're doing hot laps or something, right? And you come back, and I've been looking at the data, and you come back and you're like, hey man, tell me about my data. And you didn't have the best run. You went out there, you spun a couple of times, it wasn't great, and you're off the pace, right? And I go, Sander, man, dude, we got to talk about your hot laps. They were just fucking abysmal, mate. Like, I really mean, I've never seen someone drive worse all around in a lap. You were offline through every corner. You spun out 4 fucking times, and you were 5 seconds off the fastest time of the day. Get back up there and clean your shit up. Alternative way of saying the same message. Sander, good to see you. I've got some notes for you on your hot laps if you're interested in some feedback. You are? Great. They weren't the best of the day for sure, but I think you carry less speed into the corners and focus on hitting your lines and apexing each corner, and you'll spin out less. And you can bring that 5-second delta down to around 1 second, and then maybe say it with the pack. Get back out there and crush it. Two different ways of saying the same message. Mm-hmm. In the first one, the negative message, I had my hand on my head, I had my shoulders slumped. I used negative language selection, downward face, and no eye contact. For the positive message, my chest was up, I made eye contact, positive language selection, I was smiling, and I had my hands up instead of down. So that's the same way of saying, or 2 different ways of saying the same message. And you can use the same thing in your daily life. This goes back to similar type of Vanessa Van Edwards stuff that we were talking about a few weeks ago. But do you have any examples that you want to share?
Of mannerisms? Yes.
Please share.
I just wrote down a couple notes of like key ones that I've used or I've seen. Mm-hmm. Touching or rubbing your face, which you illustrated in your example. Mm-hmm. Could be like you're thinking about something, you might be nervous or stressed.
How do I tell Sander that he's fucking shit today?
Fidgeting, I've personally caught myself doing or seen other people doing. And from my experience, it's usually been that someone or myself feels anxious, nervous, irritated, or stressed, usually associated with something negative for me. Like if I'm fidgeting with something, I usually want to get out of the conversation.
Interesting.
Because I'm trying to focus on something else and I don't want to be wherever I am. Right. So I distract myself with fidgeting.
Right.
A few more that I use quite a bit is using my hands when I'm speaking. So I'll like use my hands to like portray things and like kind of convey them or whatever. Right. I find it super useful. I think that it helps the people around me understand what I'm trying to say a little bit better, as well as it helps me kind of think through whatever I'm trying to say.
Right.
So I use my hands quite a bit. For me, it's part of my character, but that's something that anyone can implement with practice. Mm-hmm. Looking up versus down versus to the side. Usually when I'm looking up, I'm thinking about the question or answer or thinking about like future dreams or aspirations. If I'm looking down, I'm probably talking about something uncomfortable and trying to pull a memory or thought. Mm-hmm. So either something uncomfortable and I'm kind of avoiding it, or I'm trying to pull back like a memory or thought that I can't quite remember, so I'm looking down. I've noticed that about myself. And if I'm looking to the side, usually casual conversation, kind of middle ground on the emotional scale.
I think when people lie, they look to the left, something like that.
Really?
I think so.
Huh. Interesting.
It's like to the left or up and to the left or something. Or like if you catch eye contact with somebody and they don't want you to know that they're
I've heard the up thing, like when people lie, they look up instead of down. Mm-hmm. I've heard that before. But
well, there's lying and then there's trying to remember. People will look up for both, I think.
I think people generally look down for something that they're going back in time for. That's what I've heard personally.
Interesting.
I heard that from the psychologist who analyzed the Tiger King documentary with that woman who, remember that woman who was like
Carol Baskins?
Yes, she would like maybe kill their husband by feeding him to the tigers or whatever.
Yeah.
During her videos of talking about like the experience of when, like, what happened and how he died and blah, blah, blah. She looked up to recall all the memories, and they had a psychologist on for one of the episodes, and he was like, she is totally lying throughout this whole entire episode.
So looking up is lying.
Yeah, that's at least what he said. So, take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
And eyebrows up versus down. If I like raise my eyebrows, it's usually I'm surprised about something, either positive or shocking, and potentially interested in the conversation because it's engaging.
Right.
If my eyebrows are down, I'm usually surprised in like a negative way. I'm like, what? Like that doesn't make sense.
You do it a lot when you don't understand what's going on.
Yes. Or something that I don't understand is happening, or I'm trying to distance myself from the topic. So kind of create a little bit of a emotional wall there so that I can exit shortly. So those are the main mannerisms that I have written down in terms of examples.
Yeah, and those apply to you a lot. I tried to think about the ones that I have, and I struggled because I don't think I'm intentionally super emotive in the context of not trying to send a message. So when I'm trying to speak to somebody and convey a certain emotion, I'll focus on some of those aspects, right?
Sure.
Because I'm trying to convey to you that I'm happy or sad or whatever. So like if you're super pissed off about something, I'll probably be the yin to the yang and try to be more uplifting and positive and to use those. And if you're excited and happy, I try and bring the mood down and make you sad or angry by doing the opposite. But generally speaking, like if we're sitting next to each other working and I don't feel anything a lot. Like I'm very neutral all the time. And Grace is frequently like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay. You don't seem to be. And I'm like, I just don't feel. She's like, anything? And I'm like, no. So my neutral is, I think, just a straight face. I don't think, and I've seen myself in photos and in the mirror before, and I'm like, man, there's no emotion there. It's not angry or upset, and it's definitely not happy. Like I have to, like right now, this is a big smile that I'm doing right now. This is like an intentional smile. And I know the way it looks because it does not.
Check the video for Mason's big smile.
It does not look like a big smile, but this is me intentionally trying to smile because this is my regular neutral face, what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not look happy and it does not look sad, but this is my neutral expression. I'll nod to show that I'm listening because I'm aware that I look deranged. And if I don't nod while you're speaking to me, I'll just, and you'll be like, what the fuck is happening behind this kid's eyes? So I try to nod to show that I'm listening. I think I do that unintentionally. These are my unintentional mannerisms.
Got it.
My just automatics. And then I have noticed that I pause between my responses to think about my answer, which is a newer development in my life because when I was in high school, I liked like Jimmy Carr and quick wit comedians. And so if there was a gap in conversation, I would fill the gap with fucking whatever. It didn't even have to be a value. Odds are I was trying to make somebody laugh. But now I'm much more comfortable with silences. I'm much more comfortable with gaps. And I even prefer them in some instances when I'm thinking about a response. And so those are some neutral mannerisms I've noticed about myself.
Yeah, I think I've focused on my mannerisms and how I portray myself for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a mixed bag between having to juggle different kinds of people in high school.
Yeah.
When I was growing up in high school, I was friends with a whole bunch of different people and they all had a different opinion about everything, so to kind of like juggle that sort of environment to make sure that everyone's like at least semi-cool with each other and we can all hang out and like have a good time.
Do you have a lot of friends in high school?
I wouldn't say I had a lot of friends. I would say I had like half a dozen like good friends, right? And then I had like one or two best friends at a time. But I knew a lot of people. Like I like everyone knew me and I knew everyone else pretty much.
Got it.
So I probably knew like 3 dozen different people that I could hang out with if I wanted to.
Interesting.
But I wasn't really like, I don't know. I wasn't really like in the popular crowd per se. Like I knew popular people, but I didn't really like hang out with them much. I just wasn't really interested.
Right.
And they were doing stuff that I wasn't interested in either, like, going to smoke weed or like trying to find alcohol or shit like that. So It's just stuff I wasn't really interested in at that time. I waited until senior year of college to get interested in alcohol.
Have you ever noticed how fucking boring and like bullshit popular kids in high school are? Like behind the curtain, like you actually hang out with them and you're like, this is dumb shit. Like, not actually interesting.
There was one kid who was like semi-popular who was pretty interesting. He worked at an auto shop, and every single time I saw him, he was driving a different vehicle because he would take customer cars from the auto shop and then just drive them as dailies for the week. Cool. He drove a different fucking car every single day of the week, every time I saw him. And he borrowed an early 2000s BMW 740i. They got the V8 in it. And I got to drive that while he had a Miata in front of me. And that car was actually pretty cool. That was the first Beamer I ever drove. And that kind of like got me into like the higher series BMW stuff.
See, those are the kids that you would expect to be popular, like the most popular.
Yeah.
But I frequently...
He was also like 6'3" redhead. So like he was a little bit funny looking. Yeah. He's a cool kid though. If you're listening in or you find this one day, you're a cool dude. You know,
he sounds like he should have been the most popular person.
Yeah, he was funny. He threw wicked parties.
Yeah. The people I
never went, but I heard about him.
The people I found to be the most popular in my high school were the people who had the least amount going on outside of high school. So they had the most amount of time to hang out with people, and I think that's what made them popular. Was all they had going on was hanging out with different people. Yeah. And if you're hanging out with a ton of people...
I was always focused on school. I never really, like, hung out much.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. I was always studious. I think we started getting grades in 5th grade.
Getting grades?
Yeah, like letter grades, like report cards.
Really?
Yeah, in 5th grade.
Wow. I remember getting my first ever C on a test in 1st grade, and it went downhill from there. I got my first ever D in 3rd grade. Yeah.
I got a D on one assignment in middle school, and I still remember it because it scarred me so much. Because I thought that the way the grades worked on your report card was the lowest grade you got that semester on any assignment was the letter they assigned to your report card. So I thought that this one D I got on this one assignment was going to mean I got a D in mathematics. And I was so upset.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Which actually, that happened in 7th grade, and we started getting grades in 5th grade. So that shows you how studious I was for that. For 2 years, I was so anal about my grades. I got A's on every single thing up until this one project that I kind of like didn't give a shit about, and then I got a D. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that was pretty funny.
My brother was that way. His friend group, he became friends with because they would study for tests together and SATs together. I didn't study for a single test in all of high school. My mom would try to make me. She would take my phone and she would like lock me in the office with books and be like, read and learn, and then she would quiz me afterwards. I'd fucking tank every quiz she gave me, and then I would just like figure my way through the tests. I graduated with like a 3.8 or 3.6 or something from high school.
Yeah, it was a 3.76 when I graduated.
That's good.
High school.
That's good.
Yeah,
I just fucking didn't.
English and history were my weaknesses, which they still are my weaknesses.
I think sitting and reading were my weaknesses.
Yeah, mine too. That's why I sucked at English and social studies.
All of it. I was just fucking ass. Calculus, I really sucked at. I got to calculus in my senior year, and it got so bad that if I didn't pass the last test of the year, I wouldn't get to graduate, and I didn't pass it. And so my teacher sat me down, and he was like, dude, just take the test after hours with me, and like I can help you out with the problems that you're stuck on, and we're going to get you to pass it so you can graduate. And I was like, oh, thanks, man. And so I remember I sat there and I did it, and I asked him questions on every problem, and he let me pass, and he was like, this is tough, but I'm proud of you for sticking with it. This is an AP course. Like, not a lot of kids do this. I was like, yeah. And he was like, so what are you doing after you graduate? And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Florida Tech and be an engineer. And he was like, what? He was shocked. He was like, do not do that. And he was fucking probably right. Yeah. Because I struggled all of freshman year of college. Like, I didn't learn how to study until my sophomore year, where I had a come to Jesus moment where I was like, I'm going to work at a movie theater for the rest of my life or graduate college. I need to graduate. So I fucking sat my ass down and taught myself how to study.
I have a little anecdote that I saw the other day. Quick.
Take your time.
There was a teacher and student, like 20 some odd years ago, that there was this one student who really struggled in school, and the teacher was like the only person who like helped him out and like would stay after hours with him and like go through problems and blah blah blah, and like that teacher kind of helped him go through his high school experience, and then he went off to college and stuff, and they lost contact with each other. Long story short, that student ended up going to medical school and becoming a doctor. And that teacher, when she needed life-saving surgery, it was like a kidney or something like that, I don't remember, but she needed life-saving surgery, and she didn't know, but he was the surgeon on her procedure.
Yeah.
And so he went through the procedure and he did it for her, and then he wrote her a letter like after the fact of like, hey, like, this is me, like, I performed the surgery. It's so nice to give back to you. Thank you for, you know, being the only one that believed in me, blah, blah, blah. It was super sweet. And like, he also covered like her whole surgery expense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he covered all the expenses. He performed the surgery, wrote this letter. It was really sweet. It was really sweet. It was like a 4-minute video of her reading this letter and then like meeting him. It was super cute. It was awesome. Yeah.
Did you have teachers that believed in you?
Yes. And I also had teachers that really didn't. In 4th grade, I was told that I would never graduate middle school and I would get D's in every single one of my classes.
Nice. That's a positive message.
Yeah, it was positive. That was from my Spanish teacher.
I don't think I ever had a teacher.
Real high value subject for me. I use it every day.
You take D's every day. I never had a teacher say that to me, but I also never had one with resounding confidence. I think every teacher I had this strategy, which was don't do shit for the first half of the semester. Then apply yourself for the next 30%. And then in the last 20%, go absolutely crazy and make up all the assignments I missed from the first half of the semester. And you would get like partial credit, but that's all I needed to like get a B. So I would take I would enter into the last like month of the semester with like straight D's. And my parents would be furious and I'd be like, relax, I've got it. And then I'd pull out A's and B's by the end of the semester because I would just like hustle to get the busy work done. But I think every single one of my teachers I had, when they would sit down with me, they would just put their head in their hands and they would be like, I wish you would just apply yourself. Like there's so much there and you just don't use any of it. And I was such a fucking shit. I was such a shit. I'd be like, you don't fucking know me. This is all I got. And they were like, they knew better. They were like, you don't. If you just fucking tried, you'd be really smart. And that was the message I got from every single one of them. And they were right. Because in college, I applied myself and I was fine. But until then.
I remember in 7th grade, I studied for, not shitting you, 10 hours for this history exam.
Wow.
And I got like a middle B, like an 83% or something like that. And one of my friends didn't study at all and got like a fucking 102 with the bonus problem.
That was
And I was like, this just fucking sucks. Like, I just suck at history. This is so stupid. I was so upset. But yeah, no, I was always really studious. And it's funny too, because my mom and my dad never really like pushed it on me.
Mm-hmm.
I just like wanted to do well. Like for myself, I was just like, I just want to do well. You know, like they would tease me if I got like a bad grade or something like that. But it was never like, they didn't even care if I went to college. Like they didn't, like there was no push at all. It was just like this self push to like do better and, you know, perform as well as I can.
Yeah.
So
my parents had to push me and they didn't have to push my brother. And I think that they didn't push my brother because he didn't need it, because he was exactly the same as you. He just wanted to do well. And I didn't want to be there. So I just...
Which is funny because I think a lot of people who just want to do well don't really think concretely about the rules or the structure of the society around them. Like people who want to do well don't really usually, in my opinion, end up being business people. Because they kind of just like follow the trail and kind of stay on the path and then work the path as well as they can. So I think it's kind of interesting that, I've diverted in this direction to where, you know, you and I are completely going off the path to build our own thing. You know, there are no gold stars along the way. You know, you get a gold star from everyone once you make it, but that's the only time that you don't really need a gold star.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think it's just kind of interesting, and it plays into the idea that you can really become whoever you put your mind to. You know what I mean? Everyone is born, you know, as a certain person, but you can grow into someone that you desire.
Yeah.
You know,
dude, if you sat senior year of high school Mason down and you're like, listen, like you're going to graduate with a degree in engineering, I'd be like, no way, dude, I'm going to college for engineering, but I'm not making it. Like I'm not. I remember my mom bought me a big SAT prep study book because she was like, if you don't get your SAT scores up, it doesn't matter what scholarships you get, you won't get in anywhere. And so I was like, listen, I have a friend of mine who's a year older than me who went to the same high school, and he got like a 1,500 on his SAT. Can I go study with him? And she was like, yes, absolutely. I read with this kid, Zach Gerby. My mom knows.
Oh, okay.
And she was like, go over to his house and study with him. I was like, you got it. And so I went over there, and then we worked on his BMW for 2 days. And I came back and I told my mom that I had studied because I had him burn through one of the practice tests, and I gave her that result. And I was like, this is what I did. And she was like, oh my God, you got like a whatever, 1,400. You're going to do great. And I was like, got it. And then I fucking freeballed it in the actual SAT.
You did well though, didn't you?
I ended up
like very similar scores.
My highest was a 1340.
Okay, yeah. I think I had a 1410.
Yeah.
Like very, very similar.
I took it several times. Well, and so
I took it once. Fuck that noise. I fucking hated it.
Well, the first time I took it, I got like a 1210 or something.
Yeah.
And I needed, for the Florida scholarships, like a 1290 or something. I don't know. So I had to go back and take it a second time. And the second time I took it, I had a engineering calculator, like with the touchscreen and shit. And it wasn't being held at my school. It was being held at the Neanderthal school down the road. So I had to go there to take the test. So I'm sitting there with a bunch of orangutans, and they're getting ready for like to set stuff up. The proctors are, jerking it around up at front, right? Because you all have to take it like at the same time nationwide. And all these kids and I are having conversation. They're like, dude, you got a crazy calculator. Can you play Mario on that? And I was like, no, but you can probably like program it. I don't know. Just here to test. And they were like, what are you shooting for, man? And I was like, well, I got a 1210 last time. And they were like, oh my God. And I was like, I'm trying to get like a 1300 this time. And they're like, dude. And like they all rallied behind me. And they were like, go for it, man. I was like, what are you guys aiming for? And they're like, bro, like Derek is our smartest guy. And Derek is trying to get above a 900. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah. And so all these kids rallied behind me. And like every one of them came up and like gave me a pat on the back before they started. They were like, you're going to crush this, man. Like, good luck. And so we finished, and like everyone, all these people, I'd never met them before, came up to me afterwards, and they were like, how did it feel, man? Does it feel like, 4 digits, like over 1,000? I was like, I feel good, guys. And that was the one I got 1340. And then I took it one time after that. I got like 1310, and I was like, I'm done. Fuck this.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the first test that I ever actually studied for was a thermodynamics test in sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
It was the second out of 3 tests in that semester. So it was like March. I had a 32% in the course, and I needed, like, with the curve, like a 55 to pass or something. Yeah. And I took the exam, and I got a 42%. And I was like, well, this is a step in the right direction. It's the first test I ever studied for. It's fucking terrible. Anyways, okay, back on track.
Anecdote.
Go for it. Yeah, go for
really
it.
Fast. Mm-hmm. Miklo, our professor for those courses.
Yeah.
In his, I think it was 20 years of teaching that he was at Florida Tech, he had never given out 100% for take-home exam ever in his history. And, 2 to 3 semesters a year for 20 years, never gave out 100% to any take-home exam. I received 2 of 2 that he ever gave out. And I'm very proud of that, and I wanted to shout myself.
I will say, though, he then retired immediately after that.
He did.
I think he was at his wit's end because one of the hundreds that you got was on a fucking V17 Jaguar with a stroke ratio of like 15 to 1. Do you remember your final exam that had a compression ratio of 38?
No, that wasn't my final motor, though. That was just an example of me like pulling that in and then being like, this is illogical because of X, Y, and Z. This is what I would actually recommend. So it was different, but
got it.
Yeah, it was, I love those courses.
Me too. Those are the only tests that I enjoyed studying for because it didn't feel like studying. It was just in like,
it was actually learning. Like it was real engineering. It was cool.
I never actually learned before. Anyways, I can manipulate my mannerisms if I focus on them. So like when I'm trying to send a message, I can focus on one at a time. So like I'm trying to teach myself to say "nar" instead of "no," right? So if I think about it, I can focus on it.
You should put a little silly band on, and every time you say "no" instead of "nar," you slap it. You like pull it back and let it go.
I did that for something when I was in high school, but it was like every time I said a joke.
I did it for like, I think. Like the word like if like that kind of shit. Like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
I had a little silly band. I'd slap myself.
I had it for something, but I can't remember what it was. It was probably some self-deprecating shit. But if I focus on one thing and like I pick that one thing to harp on for like a full week, I can get it. I can get there, right? So I remember my posture was fucking terrible in high school. And when I got to college, I was like, I need to sit up straight.
Yeah.
And so I really focused on like shoulders back and like getting the arch in my back. And I focused on just that for like 3 months. And I got it fixed to the point where like I don't have to think about it anymore. And it's pretty similar with the way that I learned piano or rowing, which is you pick one bar or like one technique and do it just focus on that one thing so many times. Like you forget to play the rest of the song or you forget the rest of the parts of the stroke because you're just focusing on this one aspect. And it's funny because I did that so much with piano. I never learned to read sheet music. I just learned how to play the piano because I would figure out what notes those bars meant. And then I would do that one thing over and over again until muscle memory took over. And then I would do the next one. And then I could play a full song with no sheet music or with the sheet music because I can't read sheet music anyways. And I remember for rowing one time, I was not dropping my hands enough. So like when you pull your blade out of the water, you've got to drop your hands down to get the blade to clear the water. But if I drop my hands this much and you drop your hands this much, the boat is going to tilt your direction. And so I wasn't dropping my hands enough. So the boat was offset and everyone was pissed at me. And my coach for a full practice, he was like, we're just going to do the same fucking strokes nonstop until Mason stops fucking this up. And I was like, awesome. Thanks, guys. Can't wait. And it took me the entire practice. And towards the end, like the last like 20% or so, I finally got it. And he was like, awesome. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, now you're rushing your slide. And I was like, fucking Christ, dude. Like I get one thing nailed down and now you're on to the next thing. But that's how you teach rowing is you pick one thing and you nitpick it until it's perfect. And then you realize that there are so many other things that you're fucking up. And like, then you work on the next thing. But oftentimes it's like, it's like racing is the constant search for the weakest link. Rowing is the same way. You take your weakest link, work that for 3 months, and then you go on to your next weakest link. So it's like you've got 10 weak links. You're a shit person, bad rower, but you can only work on one at a time. And I try to take the mannerisms the same way by just working one at a time. You can't suddenly become a different person overnight. You got to do one at a time.
Yeah. So is there anyone that you look up to that has a certain set of mannerisms that you really like? Anyone in maybe, famous person or someone around you that you've known from the past or whatever?
I can think of some that I really hate, but I can't think of many that
What do you hate?
The way that Lewis Hamilton speaks and interacts with everyone post-race or post-qualifying. So he qualified well yesterday. He qualified third. And pole comes up and he's like, yeah, it was a good lap. And second place comes up and he was like, not what I wanted, but, good stuff. And then Lewis Hamilton comes up and they're like, Lewis, tell us about your race. And he's like, oh, the fans here just like empower me so much that I feel like I can be the world and do anything. I haven't been this far up the grid in so long. He has 106 race wins, right? And he's crying like it's his first time up there. And it's just so fucking, it aggravates the shit out of me. I think that what really bothers me about it is not taking ownership. Maybe this isn't a mannerism per se. What are those mannerisms? It's like looking up and around and like moving your head a little bit. Like it's like I'm grateful for all of you type of thing.
Yeah.
But for something that's not that deep, bro, it's a not that deep, bro moment.
Right. I think it's also tough because it seems ingenuine when, some super famous person goes up there and they're like, oh my God, the fans empower me to like drive faster. You know what I mean? And like, I feel like a good amount of the audience just kind of wants to hear about your lap or how your self-reflection is, impacting your racing or whatever. To say that like the fans are the fuel for your car, I think is like, okay, bro. Like
now what I love when Seb Vettel won races with Ferrari, he would go like, yes, thank you, viva Ferrari, whatever. And then he would speak in Italian to the fans. I love that. Because that's like a passion for everything. Like, I crushed this lap. You guys did the pit stop well. You nailed the strategy. You built me a hell of a car. And the fans here, I'm so happy to be celebrating this win with you guys.
Yeah.
But Lewis Hamilton is like, if you don't believe in fairies, I'll fade away. So, like, the more you believe, the more pixie dust I have. And it makes me irate.
I get that. It doesn't bother me as much, but I do see that. Yeah.
In stark contrast, Oscar Piastri won his second race in Formula One a few weeks ago. His first one was handed to him by team orders because they had favored Lando when they shouldn't have to like help him get up position. So Lando got out of the way to let him win. Didn't feel real, but he won his first one. Crazy race. Absolutely fucking crushed it in Baku. And he crossed the line and they were like, oh my God, like Oscar, like you did it. Like you fucking fantastic job. And he went, yes. Thanks guys. That was a stressful race. Like that was it. That was the whole reaction. And I was like, Oscar Piastri is my favorite driver in all of Formula One history because it's not like Kimi Räikkönen, Iceman, where it's like cold, no emotion. Like he feels emotion. He's just not like sobbing into his hands out of gratitude for the fans for helping him get to P3 in qualifying. Like he just won a race on his own merit with Charles Leclerc bearing down on him every lap for 40 laps and kept his tires alive and fucking crushed it. And he was like, all right. That's what I like. I think what I like is this is similar to when everybody is talking about a new movie that they really love and they're getting all amped about it. And they're like, oh my God, like we should go together. And I'm like, I fucking hate that movie. I hate the whole theme. I hate the genre. I don't like you as a person.
There actually is a movie that I want to go with you to.
That I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But
no, I actually did genuinely want to buy us tickets.
Which movie?
Am I Racist with Matt Walsh.
I'll see that.
Yeah. Did you watch his previous documentary? It was, or like comedy documentary. It was,
What is a Woman?
Yes. What is a Woman?
No.
Okay, got it. It's a similar theme to that, but it's about like racism in America. And Joe Rogan had Matt Walsh on a podcast recently, and he raved about it, like loved it.
I saw that podcast. Joe seemed to really like it. I like comedies, so I'll go see it.
Yeah. I thought we could go this weekend, maybe.
Yeah. Matt Walsh was unimpressive on that podcast, but I think it's largely because Joe started talking about the moon landing and then went off on a fucking tangent.
Got it. I actually didn't watch the podcast. I just started it, and then they started to have a couple spoilers, and I turned it off. I was like, I don't want to.
Yeah. No, they're like 15 minutes in, they're talking, like Matt Walsh is contributing to the podcast, and then Joe is like, you really think we landed on the moon? And Matt's like, I don't know much about this topic. And Joe's like, let me tell you about it. And then the next 3 hours, like him like, God fucking harping on this. And like, I don't really know Matt Walsh as a person. I don't think he got a chance to really contribute much to that fucking podcast, but I'll see the movie.
I watch some of his content elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I personally enjoy it. Some of it I don't, some of it I do, but I do want to see the movie. So if you want to go together, we can.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
When I actually had a conversation with Grace about something similar the other day, because when we started dating, I said the word retarded. And she was like, I really hate that word. And I was like, okay.
I remember this. I remember you coming to me and be like, I don't know, man. Like, it's so hard for me to get out of my vocabulary.
It is hard. Well, and she was like, it's tough. Can you stop saying it around me? And I was like, yeah. And my intention was, I'm going to stop. I understand she has only ever attributed that word to malicious intent. People don't say it jokingly in her life. People say it cruel. She has autism. So when people call her a retard or say that, it is meant with like, you are stupid and a bad person, right?
Right.
And she's never heard it jokingly before. So for a stranger, because we'd only been dating for like a couple weeks at that time, when someone says it, there could be malicious intent there. But I was like, I'll stop saying it for a while so that she can get comfortable with me as a person and learn that I don't hate people with mental disabilities. I'm dating one. And then I
am one.
And then I fucking maybe, mate. But and then I can integrate it back into my vocabulary because she'll see that it's not like malicious. And so recently she was like, I said it, and she was like, hey, you said you were going to stop saying that. What's the deal? And I was like, well, I did. And then you learned that I don't actually hate people with disabilities. So then I started saying it again. It's like how you can joke about 9/11 because you don't actually think that it's a joke. It's a very serious topic, but you know, since you believe it's a serious topic, you can cope with it by making jokes.
Yeah.
And she did not understand. She was like, I thought you were doing it like because you cared about how I feel. And I was like, no, I mean, I care about how you feel, but I'm not going to change myself to make you feel better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so in a similar fashion, it's like, I don't want to change who I am or what I say for other people because they're misunderstanding what I mean. So now Grace knows that I don't hate people with disabilities. And so when I say that word, it's meant as a joke and not with malicious intent. And so the am I a racist topic is interesting to me because I feel like there are people who make racist jokes or make racist remarks who are not racist. That's the basis of comedy, right? I'm not this thing, and I'm going to pretend that I am, and that's the joke.
Yeah.
And then there are people who do think those things and say it, and they laugh about it, but it's cruel. It's meant cruelly. Yeah. And people all too often attribute malice to people who don't.
And honestly, in either case, I would argue that good conversation and communication can solve a lot of the issues that arise with, racist commentary that you don't know how to take, or the word retard, or whatever. Like, if people are willing to talk with each other and have a conversation about it and, be professional, I think we would be able to have a lot more fruitful discussion and progress forward.
Even if you are racist or do hate people with mental disabilities, and you're like, hey, man, when you say that word, it makes me feel like you really hate these people. And then I go, yeah, I do. Then you go, all right, I don't think I want to be around you anymore. Thanks for playing, mate. And
right. Or, well, why do you think that way? Like, I don't understand why you would think that way because of the X, Y, and Z reasons. Like, there can always be a conversation that's had people just usually aren't willing to have that conversation. I think that's a loss.
One mannerism that I have been trying to cut out of my life that I again noticed from Lewis Hamilton is making assumptions. So recently, the FIA has cracked down on drivers for swearing on team radio. And the drivers are like, hey, mate, maybe don't broadcast that because I'm going to swear. And so then Max Verstappen swore at a press conference, and the FIA gave him like public service duty, like go pick up trash. And Max was like, this is fucking retarded. I don't hate people with disabilities. Max was like, this is retarded. And so at the next press conference, people were asking him questions, and he was giving one-word answers. And then they were like, can you elaborate, like, please, Max? And he was like, I would rather not say anything in here because I don't want to get another, like, fine or anything. Why don't we talk outside? So he went outside and held his own press conference on the front lawn.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's badass.
And so everybody's asking the drivers what they feel about this, and everyone's like, bro, go Max. But Lewis Hamilton is like, so Mohammed bin Sulayem, the president of the FIA, was like, drivers shouldn't be swearing. They're role models and athletes. You know, we're not rappers. Like, we shouldn't be swearing like this. And someone asked Lewis Hamilton what he thought, and he was like, there seems to be a racial undertone there because a lot of rappers are black. And so that's not a good thing to say. Yeah. And so then I was like,
what the fuck does racism have to do with people swearing on track?
Exactly. Well, because he said rappers. And so Lewis Hamilton was like, well, a lot of rappers are black. So do you have a problem with black people? And I'm like, where the fuck are we coming from with this? So like a lot of the race hate stuff is like just fucking manifested out of nowhere. Like I haven't seen anything else from Mohammed bin Sulayem that says that. And he's not like, I don't think the black drivers should swear anymore. Yeah. He's just saying generally like, we're not rappers, and swearing is big in the rap community. Regardless of who's in the rap community, there are all kinds of rappers. It's a music style.
If I asked you to close your eyes right now and then tell me each thing that's red in this room, you probably wouldn't be able to name a single thing. But if I gave you 5 seconds to look around, you'd be able to name a bunch of things. It's right. Like whatever you are willing to look for is what you will find. And you can pull assumptions from that either way, right?
And so Lewis Hamilton was automatically assuming and attributing that there was a racial undertone to that where there really wasn't one. And that can be really easily detected by just sitting down with someone and being like, hey, dude, I feel like there's a racist message attached to this. Is that your meaning? Because I'll tell you what, if they're racist, they'll fucking let you know. And if they're not, they'll let you know. Like either way, all it takes is asking.
Yeah. 100%.
Those are mannerisms that I detest. I don't think I included any that I enjoy. Oscar Piastris I enjoy. What about you?
Any that I detest?
Or like? Either way.
I really like people who don't let, like if there's a bad situation going on, they don't let that bad situation percolate into every other aspect of their life. They kind of segment it and categorize it. Or if they, for example, on the way to Kraken this morning, or this afternoon, it was noon. So on my way to Kraken, I forgot my printed sheets and your printed sheet on the printer. And I was like 10 minutes out. And I was like, well, fuck, like now I got to turn around. I don't want to screw with the printers at the library and stuff like that. So I turned around and I was driving back and I was upset because I was like, this is such a waste of time. And I was thinking, and I was like, me being upset does nothing to change the situation. I might as well just enjoy my music or my podcast and chill and just go home, grab the sheets, and then carry on with my day. Like me being upset about it doesn't fucking change a thing. So why am I going to waste my energy and effort and, strain myself mentally about this? You know what I mean? I like people who are relatively stoic when it comes to problems and stuff like that. That's obviously a small problem and a small example, but I like that kind of character trait. The reason I mentioned a character trait is I defined mannerism in my own sheet as a character trait or action that portrays a certain emotion. So
it's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, that's how I portrayed it. Kind of a little bit shorter, but
I've noticed that a lot of the people I look up to are emotional when they're happy, and then they're very serious when they're upset. So they don't ever show like outrage. They show joy and then stoicism and problem solving. So like if something's going wrong or something is upsetting me, I'm trying to make an intentional effort, unlike my rant about Lewis Hamilton 30 seconds ago. It's still work in progress. To be more stoic and serious about it instead of yelling and like swearing at someone in traffic. Instead, like just pass the person. Like, just focus on solving the problem.
I've been focusing on that as well over the last few months.
It's tough. I hate so many things.
But it feels good because every single time I've gotten really upset about a situation, in retrospect, I feel like I let myself down, right? Because it was like, I could have handled that better. I could have done better, right? And I feel like what?
Really?
Yeah. Like I feel like if I get upset in a situation or I make a wrong move or I yell at someone or whatever, like, I'm like, man, like, I could have fucking handled that so much better. I feel like I let myself down. So I try to think about those situations and think about how I felt after the fact when I'm in a stressful or upsetting, place or time. And I think, okay, what can I do right now to make future me proud of how I handled the situation?
Interesting.
And that's kind of how I go about it, to kind of give myself that self-accountability, to kind of hold myself to the standards that I want to live up to. And the more I do it, the more I feel like it becomes ingrained in who I am and how I, carry myself. And then I have to think about it less. And then I see myself at least as a better person, developing from that.
I get a lot of dopamine from getting angry and yelling at people.
I do too, but
I love clapping back.
In retrospect, it just doesn't feel like the right thing.
Looking back, I'm more proud of the times I've insulted somebody and found it to be funny or accurate than the times that I have made like lighthearted, fun jokes and have had people like it. I think that comes from like the like rap disses and stuff that I listened to growing up and stuff, and like the quick-witted comedians like insulting people and stuff. Like I get positive feedback from getting upset and getting angry at people, like your mom jokes with Chase and shit.
Yeah.
Like more aggressive stuff. But when I think about the people who I look up to, none of them do that. So now it's like, okay, well, if I enjoy doing it, but it's not the type of behavior that I want to be doing because it doesn't align with the people who I look up to, how do I cut it out? But also, how do I keep it in my pocket in case I ever need it? Because if someone's fucking up and I've already spoken to them seriously about it, and now I need to get aggressive, do I have that quick wit still in the locker?
I think it's a balance, right? I just try to limit it to where I feel is necessary, right? Yeah. Like me getting upset at myself in the car because I forgot to grab the printed sheets off my printer is not a useful use of my energy.
Right. That's fair.
So I just try to find a balance in there. But you want to jump into part 2?
Yeah.
Anything to tag along to part 1? Are you good?
I got all my part 1 stuff.
Awesome. Let's hit it off.
Okay. Part 2, segment 2. How to apply mannerisms effectively. Selecting the right mannerism is integral to conveying your message ideally, but it can sometimes be tough to discern what mannerism to use. One of the toughest questions, especially in management or leadership positions, is when to sugarcoat and when to speak bluntly. These are two tactics with the same goal, which is effective communication. You had something to say?
No.
Got it. I heard your lips.
Finish up. No.
Anyways, so I think that there are two routes that you can take, generally speaking, when encountering an issue with a interaction, which is to sugarcoat it, be overly nice, or be blunt, which can sometimes be misconstrued as being rude. I'm the master of the second. So I want to first talk about purposeful politeness and inclusion before we talk about the bluntness, which we have cataloged as blatant honesty. So do you want to lead us into the purposeful politeness or inclusion? I see a lot of this in your life, and I hear you talk about it a lot.
I'll dive into my view on purposeful politeness and inclusion, and then you can piggyback off of that.
Right on.
And kind of give your view on it. But, I use purposeful politeness a lot at kava bars. And I think that's partly because a lot of the time I spend is at a kava bar. Like I go to work, and then from work I'll go home really briefly and then go to a kava bar for a large majority of the evening and then come home to sleep, essentially. But I use it, purposeful politeness, to kind of try and let someone down easy if they're having a conversation with me that I kind of want to get out of. There is a balance between whether I find it a complete waste of time or beneficial, because I think earlier on I said that you never know when someone around you is going to prove to be helpful or important in your life. So, don't waste connections over little semantics.
Can I jump in there super quick?
Yeah.
When I hear that, this is not what you mean, but I want to provide clarity. It's not from a selfish state of, well, maybe this person can help me out later.
Thank you.
There's a second side of it too, which is you never know what kind of day someone's having. And if you're having a terrible day, like a polite interaction that's super brief and doesn't really impact you can make a world of a difference in that person's day. We know somebody who's been going through some stuff lately, and last night we shared a drink together and had a really awesome, brief connection with that person. That might have made their entire day. Right. And it wasn't long. It didn't take a lot. We went right back to work afterwards. It was not a big deal. But the difference between choosing politeness in that scenario and blatant honesty, which is not right now, mate, I'm working, might be a big difference in their day. Yeah. There are several people who I went to high school with who I got messages from in college, because we all know the same person who committed suicide in high school. And it was really sad at the time. And so a lot of my friends, throughout high school would look back on her and think to themselves like, well, man, maybe she had it figured out. And I talked to a lot of them in those moments, and they came back to me in college and they were like, thank you for being there because I almost committed. And I was like, I had no idea you were that close. And they were like, yeah, I can think of like 2 or 3 occasions where we were talking. And like, just because I had somebody to talk to that evening stopped me from doing it. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. Like they were just regular conversations to me.
I had I lost count at a certain point. I think I had over 4 or 5 friends that attempted during my time between middle school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like a huge influx of like people attempting suicide. I was like, holy shit. Like it was just wild.
Yeah. I remember the day I went to school where
so sad.
Or actually, no, it happened over the summer. But the first day back, everyone like knew.
Yeah.
Because we all knew the girl. She's just super sweet. She's just friends with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy who tries it. I mean, there was kids who were genuinely popular and cool who are just like, not happy with their life for whatever reason.
And her home life was good too. Like there was no telling what was going on in her head. But when we say that, you never know when someone could come back to help you, it's not from a selfish standpoint of, well, maybe I can get something back later. It's maybe we can benefit each other someday, and maybe I'm benefiting them right now just by not interacting with them in a polite fashion.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't come from 100% a selfish standpoint.
Absolutely.
Like, what can I get out of them? You know what I mean?
Right.
But there's obviously benefits to having people around you, connections, someone to talk to, someone to bounce ideas off of, you know, someone to communicate with, someone to uplift your day, right? So you don't want to ruin every single connection that you come across throughout your day,
right?
Because you're in a bad mood that day, or you want to get an extra 5 minutes of work done or whatever.
Right.
So that's kind of my point in that. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Just stopping the haters.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. I've been trying to find a good balance between being purposefully polite as well as just being honest about what I have to do that day and accomplish, right? I like your method. It's like you ask them 2 questions, right? And then they ask you 1 question, essentially, or they ask you a question and then you ask them 2, and then you jump out of the conversation, right? I like that style of thinking. I have like a couple basic questions that I usually run through with someone that's just like coming up with me to chat. And then I'll politely try to be like, hey, like really nice to chat with you. I'll do a low with you later, whatever, right? Something like that. And then kind of get back to work.
Dude, I've got a new hack.
Yeah? What's up?
So with the Australian thing, right? I have been saying, instead of saying like, hey, how are you today? Or how are you? There's an Australianism, which is, how are you going? But they go, how you going? And when I go up to people, I go, how you going? And they're like, I'm good. How are you? And I go, I'm great, mate. And they're like, all right. And then that's it. That's it. Because they don't know what the fuck I'm doing and how I'm reacting.
That's funny.
Or I'll we'll say something, or I'll be like, how you doing, Joel? And he'll be like, oh, I'm great. I'm like, I'm happy to hear it, dude. I'm gonna see you later, Kraken. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, right, oh, mate. And I go back to work. And like, I noticed that if I start the conversation with Australian accent and then speak English and then end it with an Australian accent, they register that as the end of the conversation. And
interesting.
It's fucking weird. I love playing with this, and it's so fun to do. It's such a fun accent.
I usually end conversations with like a little lighthearted joke or something like that, or like just some funny phrase so that it, exits with a smile, essentially. I found that pretty useful for myself, but I want to dive into a little bit of the idea that people are born or not born with certain mannerisms, right? I think this is especially applicable to purposeful politeness, because a lot of people that I've talked to are like, oh, well, I'm just like polite by nature. I grew up that way. Like, I just want to, make sure that everyone feels included, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And I think that, yes, there are certain traits that are, temporarily instilled in you when you are a young person, young kid or whatever, but it is your choice whether to change those or carry them forward.
Yeah.
Right? For example, like I used to be someone who just didn't want to bother anyone at all. Like I just wanted everything to be cool, be friends with everyone, entertain everyone's conversation, blah, blah, blah. And I've started to stray away from that over the last, couple of years and kind of stand my ground a little bit more. And obviously I'm not perfect, but it's an active change that I've been willing to make because I've been willing to work on it. Right. And so I think a lot of people get stuck in this hurdle of like, I can't really change who I am, so I just have to accept who I am. And I think that that's kind of a sad mindset, personally. I think it's sad because it forces you to be okay with whoever you are today, right? No matter your position, right? And if you have this dream out there that you want to achieve, you're mentally blocking yourself from achieving that because you're saying that I have to be happy with who I am because I can't change who I am.
I think a lot of people use it as an excuse to not chase their dream.
Right. And I think that's sad because you can flip it around and then you can put the power in your own hands. You could be like, I accept who I am today, but I want to become who I am capable of one day, and then work towards that person. Like, you can completely flip that mindset and still accept who you are today. You just don't have to be satisfied with who you are today. Those are very different. And I think that's really limiting to a lot of people. And it's sad for me because I've noticed a mental shift in how I approach issues after I changed that about myself, right? Because I grew up in Massachusetts where everything was like, oh, accept who you are and like be happy with who you are and like blah, 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 right? And I was like, well, this doesn't really sit well with me back then. And I didn't really understand why until more recently. And it was like, well, because I think that people should be able to work towards what they're capable of, not just be satisfied with who they are today, right?
Yeah.
If I was 400 pounds overweight and I was going to die at 40 because I was a type 2 diabetic, like, I'm not going to be happy with who I am today. I'm going to be happy at looking at the person I can potentially become, which would be, reasonable weight, healthy, exercising, and working on their fitness goals and stuff like that. Like, I could be happy with that person, but, I don't have to be satisfied with this like overweight me, right? For example, 2 years ago I was overweight and I worked on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not by any means like some pro athlete or whatever, but I lost somewhere between 30 and 40 pounds.
Yeah.
And, I'm definitely...
It's weird. Like, you didn't look super out of shape.
Back then?
Yeah, no.
Really?
No. You carry weight well.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I weighed 185 pounds. Yeah.
There was like a little bit...
48 now.
There was like a little bit of belly fat showing through shirts, like from certain angles, but for maybe a little bit in your chin. I notice your jawline a lot more now, but for the most part, like, I don't think I've seen 40 pounds drop from someone and have it look... I don't think I've seen somebody carrying around 40 pounds with them and have it look as natural. Most times when someone's dropped 40 pounds on them, you're like, God damn.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I had this friend in high school and he gained actually around 40 or 50 pounds. And I didn't see him for a year. So when I first saw him like 1 year ago, he was 200 pounds. And then I saw him a year after that and he was 250 pounds. And in his mind, he was like, yeah, like I've gained some weight, but like, I don't think you can really tell. The first thing I noticed when I saw him was like, holy shit, this guy big.
Good shit.
Yeah. I was like, this guy big.
Well, and the difference as well is that even at your heaviest, I was still like 20 pounds heavier than you. So like I'm a larger person.
But I'm a much smaller guy. Like I have much less muscle mass.
Yes, but what I'm saying is from my perspective, I'm a larger person in both instances. So you are a smaller person than me, even at your heaviest versus your lightest. So when I'm comparing your heaviest versus your lightest, both of them are less than me. So they kind of like blend together. But if I see somebody who's my weight or heavier, and then they get heavier than that, it seems like a larger difference from my perspective because they're already larger than me as a human. It's an interesting development.
Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyways, I digress.
Yeah. No, you're good.
But yeah, I think that people are reluctant. I don't think that people understand that you can change your messaging, the way you speak, even the way you feel, as easy as your body. Like you can change your weight and your muscle mass the same way you can change how you think about things and how you interact. It just takes a lot of effort, and people don't want to put in effort.
It takes work. It's easier to complain about your problems than to solve them. And that's what people end up doing. And I think that's sad because everyone's capable of something greater than what they are today.
Yeah.
Right? Greater in a relative sense, whatever your goals are.
Right. Do you know how to lie effectively? Do you know the technique for it?
I've always been like decent at lying, but I've kind of gotten out of my like good lying phase because I've stopped doing it pretty much. I mean, I'll do like a white lie here and there to like, thou shalt not be named at NASA, right? But
right,
it's like I don't really practice it anymore. But
the best way to lie, and this is from like CIA investigators and stuff, is when you're lying, you need to convince yourself that the lie is the truth. So let's take O.J. Simpson for example, right? He would like, I don't know if this is true, but fucking let's just use it as an example, right? Or someone like O.J. Simpson. You murder your wife and you bury the body or whatever, and now people are asking you about it. You need to lie to yourself and tell yourself that it didn't happen. Manufacture a fake story for that night and visualize it so clearly that becomes your reality. Because if it becomes your reality, you'll be so certain that everyone else will be convinced the same. So when you're lying about something, like a big lie, not like no, I didn't have a snack last night before I went to bed, like a fucking bigger lie, right? Like I cheated on my SAT exam or something like that.
Sure.
You need to become so certain and so convinced in your own mind, like a level of delusion, of visualization to the sense of delusion. And then the lie becomes effective. And I think that that's the same technique that I use to change my emotive state and my mannerisms, which is just whatever my goal is. Like if I want to be less upset about things, I will try to visualize and convince myself that it's not upsetting and it doesn't matter to such an extent that it's delusion from my perception, because again, it's all relative to your own perception. So like delusion is not a disconnection between, it's not really delusion, because delusion is a difference between reality and your perception. This is a difference between my perception and my emotion, and manipulating that isn't quite delusion because I'm still in touch with reality. But that's how I change my emotive states.
Interesting. Yeah.
But people don't get that. Do that. That's like going. It's like going to the gym in your mind. It's like going to the gym to change your body, and then lying to yourself to change your emotions in your brain to change your personality.
Well, actually, it's funny. You actually use that kind of technique in racing too. Like you'll visualize your laps, or I'm sure that you visualize your strokes, or like the race along whatever canal or river that you're in, right?
Dude, I've become a different person. When I'm on land and like chatting with my competition and whatever, we're all buds, we're all rowers, we're all brothers in this sport, right? And then I get in the boat and I'm like, I want to kill these people. Like there's no love lost for these people. Like I want to fucking dominate. I want to crush. And then we get off the water and I'm like, that was a great race, guys. Like you saw me karting for the qualifying thing, right? You enter. The athletes flip the switch and you become a different fucking person. And if I can flip that switch for athletics, why can't I flip that switch every day of my life to be whatever kind of person I want to be?
100% agree.
Maybe this is sociopathic, but maybe I fucking hope this never comes up in an investigation right there. I would never do anything. But like in terms of bettering myself, I think that people all too often get stuck in, I hate myself, like I just hate who I am as a person, and they don't recognize that you can change how you think and act about things the same way you can change how you look.
Yeah. 100% agree.
Yeah. So I found that I don't tend to sugarcoat a lot. I usually will go with the blatant honesty that we'll get into in a minute. But I found that I intentionally sugarcoat with highly emotional people. And that's because highly emotional, responsive people are more likely to act recklessly. And this comes into play when they're confronted with an outcome that they don't like. So I've got two examples here. One of them is mothers. Very emotional, a lot of it comes from love, right? But you want to kind of lay them down easy because you know that they're going to freak out. So I remember when I crashed my Firebird in high school, I spun out and slid it up on a curb and I snapped the axle. And I called my mom. I had driven my brother to school that day. And I called my mom and I intentionally, when she picked up, and she was like, hello? I was like, hi, how are you? And she was like, I'm good. And I was like, what are you up to? She was like, I'm making breakfast. And I was like, cool. And she was like, what's going on with you? And I was like, oh, we're stopped by the fire department. I've got a problem with my car. And she was like, oh, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, I spun out and crashed it up onto a curb, but I didn't hit anything and we're both okay. And she was like, oh, all right. But if I had picked up the phone and been like, hi, I crashed the car, she would have immediately freaked out. So I try to sugarcoat with highly emotive people because you never really know what they're going to do. Great example of this, I'm going to name drop Trish from our SAE team. She flew off the handle. And you and I weren't sure if she was going to try to stab us or not. So we were very polite and sugarcoaty because we didn't know what she was going to do. The unpredictability makes me want to lay them down easy. Right?
Yeah, there was for me, I'd say it was a real juggling exercise of like, who are you talking to and how do you want to talk to them?
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of people who put in minimal effort that somehow convinced themselves they were the staple of the team leadership. And then there was also a few good people, genuine good people.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, I try to approach, usually when it's someone I don't know, I'll approach with a little bit of sugarcoating just to start out because I don't know who I'm dealing with or who I'm talking to.
Right.
But I have this a little bit later on. Usually if I'm giving out blatant honesty or if I'm being blunt, it's because I respect the person I'm talking to and I know that they can take it and I want them to improve because I want to see them do better. If it's a lot of sugarcoating and, trying to make people feel good and not hurt their feelings, it's probably not someone that I think is ready to grow yet.
Yeah.
And so I kind of juggle that a little bit and try to find a balance. And, a few things I have throughout my sheet here and that came up frequently as I was writing this was it just takes a lot of practice. Like you just got to go through the motions of being polite or being honest, figuring out what works for you, using the few mannerism techniques that we talked about with, the hand motions or the eye contact, or like, how do you position your head? How do you sit? Do you sit upright? Are you slouched in with your shoulders in? Stuff like that.
I think that identifying if that person has potential is a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I have it phrased as weak people and weekend people. So weak people, like an example is here. An example of a weak person. An employee is unhappy with their work environment, but they're only receiving negative reviews as a result of that. As a manager, piling on is not going to help. Reading the negative reviews and telling them they're doing a shit job, like clearly they're already unhappy and unmotivated, piling on isn't going to help. They need some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, or they're just going to spiral into worse performances. You need to give them something, some kind of help, some kind of like, oh, it's not that bad. They do this with Donald Trump. Every morning when he gets his president's daily brief, they would give him a positive and then a negative and then a positive again. Because in conversation, if you sandwich with negativity, the message that the person takes away is negative. If you sandwich with positivity, the message someone takes away is positive. And that's one of the lessons that I learned from running the SAE team. But it's easy to integrate here too with this employee is you say, hey, I think you're doing well at XYZ. Our reviews show some negative things, but here are some positive reviews. And so then they walk away with something to work on instead of getting kicked while they're down. A emotionally weakened person example is different. It's like motivating a basketball team when they're down at halftime. Sugarcoating will inspire them more by saying, hey, listen, guys, we're probably going to have to call this one an L and try again next week. Like that's the blatant honesty, and that doesn't work. So I think that there are moments where sugarcoating is beneficial, even if you believe in those people to improve. It's dependent on what mindset that person's in at the time.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. It's kind of like checking into rehab. Like if you're not willing to learn and willing to get better, then you don't want to hear it, right? If someone says you need to go to rehab, you're going to be like, fuck you, man, I don't have a drinking problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act, and it just takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes practice.
And like we said earlier, I don't think that you're born with it. I think it's totally learned. And I think that largely comes from the feedback that you see when you're growing up. So if you sugarcoat things and then you get a positive feedback from that, you continue to sugarcoat things, right? Or be nice or polite. So I remember I would always be overly nice to my mom in hopes that she would like buy me Legos, and that would always work. So I would be continually nice to her and other people in my life. And my brother was a dick to my mom because he realized early on that she was our mom and would do it anyways. So he would wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I want to make my own breakfast. I want to save you the time and the effort, and I want to do it myself and be independent. And my brother, through college, when he visits home, he's like, will you make me pasta? And she's like, yeah. So like he has learned that he doesn't have to be polite or nice to my mom. But we grew up in the same house, just with different inputs.
Yeah.
So that wraps everything I have for the politeness and inclusion.
Yeah.
So let's now talk about blatant honesty. This is my specialty. This is where I have rocked and rolled for the last 10 years of my life. I define blatant honesty as this is when you remove emotions from the picture entirely. You speak only in fact. With brutal honesty, you often use this to describe telling somebody something they don't want to hear. But this is the wrong approach. Blatant honesty should be a scientific analysis of a situation, speaking only in fact, with no assumptions, or judgment. And that last part is critical. I think that we'll go into communication next, but the outcome of poor communication is people making assumptions to fill the gaps. And that's what you want to avoid, because that's when misinterpretations come into play. And you don't control your assumptions. That comes up from your own mind. And since you have no control over that, that's something dangerous, right? So what does blatant honesty look like? Do you have any examples? Anything that you'd like to bring to the table?
Why don't you go through how you analyze it, and then I'll jump on.
Okay. My example that first comes to mind is the word retard with my girlfriend the other day. I told her blatantly, I was like, hey, listen, like I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I'm unwilling to change my personality to make you feel better. And I'm unwilling to do that with everybody. And that's not a slight to you. I love you and I care about how you feel, but I'm not going to change myself to make you feel better. And that was a constructive conversation. And I told her, if you're struggling to understand this, like we can schedule a therapy appointment together and like I can talk with you with the mediator, but I didn't get emotional. I was just straightforward and honest, and it wasn't a problem at all. And so I really wholeheartedly believe that every single situation can be handled with blatant honesty if it's conducted correctly.
Yes, I agree. I think it's also, like I said earlier, it's really a sign of respect and care in a lot of ways. If you're able to be blatantly honest with someone, that shows that not only do you respect yourself in the sense of like, I stand my ground and I stand my beliefs and I'm willing to express them to the people around me, but you also give the other person value in the sense that I think that you can handle this. You can have a real conversation. I respect you as an individual.
Right.
There are, of course, times where you have to use caution, right? You know, with certain people that you don't know, or maybe people that you know are a little bit on the edge when it comes to honesty and stuff like that. And if you want to maintain that relationship or connection, then you have to be a little bit cautious. But I think it's a sign of respect more than anything else.
I think with those people, you can still be blatantly honest with those people. You just have to time it well. So if that person isn't looking for advice, I think that being blatantly honest can be really easily attributed to advice, because at the end of the day, it's an analysis, but it's coming from you and will be perceived as an opinion. If it's an accurate opinion, then they believe it's honesty. But if they have a skewed vision of what's actually going on here, they might misconstrue that as being your opinion. And so I think that a big mistake people often make with blatant honesty is they give it when it hasn't been asked for, similar to unsolicited advice. So I've got a great quote that I actually have posted on my personal Twitter. It goes, "A guide for high productivity members in a romantic relationship. When your partner is unhappy and complaining to you, gently stop them and ask them this question. Are you looking for comfort or a solution?" It's the same concept with honesty and advice and opinions and all those things. It's, do you want me to actually tell you what I really think and break down what's actually going on here? Or do you just want to vent? Because, you know, you're not going to listen to me if you just want to vent.
I usually go for giving the person advice because my character is, I don't really see a lot of value in just being a set of ears without a solution being proposed. You know, I know that other people do, but I like, at least with the people that are closer to me, I like to surround myself with people that are more solution driven than they are like complainer driven. And so I think that people in general will benefit from having solutions to the problems in their life rather than just talking about them. Additionally, I think that just talking about your problems without a solution solidifies the problem, and it builds the problem into who you are and your character. And I think that can be dangerous in some respects, and it can also demotivate you to improve. And so I try to be solution focused most of the time with the people around me.
It's tough because if someone doesn't want your advice or they're not looking for a solution, they'll just get more upset. Then you're trying to solve their problem for you and they just want to like feel emotions or whatever. I don't understand that because I usually look for problems. But I think an easy way around that is just like, hey man, do you mind if I give my 2 cents? And they'll always say yes, and then you can be direct. What I like to do is the same function, but a little differently. I'll say, I'm struggling to follow. Can I explain the situation to you and make sure that I'm understanding it correctly? And they'll go, yeah. And then I'll break the problem down. And then I'll go, is that right? Am I understanding this right? And they'll go, yeah. And then I'll go, oh, okay. Well, I mean, it seems to me X, Y, Z. Like, because I'm trying to understand. That's the angle that I come at it. But I'm shifting the perspective to a more neutral setting to get them to understand.
Yeah, that's a good tip too.
That's how I usually handle these things. But I think that true honesty will strengthen relationships that help you achieve your goals and unravel relationships that do not. So there's never a wrong time to use it, because if it ends up like deteriorating the conversation, that's not a person you want to be around.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I had later on was like, if you cannot be blatantly honest to someone and tell them the truth, is that a connection really worth saving?
No.
Right?
It's kind of like how you don't want to date somebody who doesn't like you. Like, it's just not going to be an effective relationship.
Right.
And that's an easy way to tell when you're talking to a stranger or somebody who's new. If they are unwilling to hear you out or don't want to hear the reality, that's a huge red flag too. Okay, I'm not going to go into business with this person or date them.
I think something that you brought up to me a while back too is if you're being honest with someone and it makes them upset, there's the potential for there being some truth to whatever you're saying. And so they should really, if it makes the person upset, they should really take the time to consider what is being said and why. Yeah. Right. And I think that's generally applicable to a variety of different situations. I just don't know if people in general, at least in the majority sense, have the willpower to be able to really consider those things critically. I think a lot of people do, but it's an unlocked potential that,
Right.
people don't go through the hard work to acquire.
Yeah. Well, it's like how Hermosi does this a lot with if you're upset by something, consider there might be some truth there.
Yeah.
Because if I say, dude, I fucking hate the color of your hair, why would you ever dye it purple? You're not upset. You're like, I don't have purple hair, right? But if I go, hey, man, you're looking kind of tubby these days, right? And you're like, whoa, what the fuck, man, right? Maybe you are. Yeah. Like, consider that, because you wouldn't be upset if it weren't true.
Right.
So, like, my coworkers, when I was an intern, would make fun of me every once in a while for being out of shape. And it's because I constantly talked about rowing and being an athlete. And they were like, oh, you don't look like an athlete. And, like, I know that I do because I fucking am. But it doesn't bother me that they make these jests because I am confident in what I have, right? And that's the same as the purple hair. Like, if you're absolutely confident that this is the way things are, it's not going to upset you if someone calls you out for it. But if you are lying to yourself about it, like, oh, I look great, but you actually don't think that you do, and someone says, hey, you don't really look that great, you get upset.
Yeah. You see it a lot on social media.
You see
people get called out for their shit, and then they get offended and defensive.
Mm-hmm.
There was the British newscaster, Pierce. Is it Morgan Pierce?
Sure.
I don't know. Someone. Anyways, he was on a newscast event, and it was 4 people plus him talking about how to get in shape. And they were talking about like all these tricks and tips and blah 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 and all this stuff, and then he butts in and he's just like, exercise more and eat less, and they all get like riled up, like everyone gets super upset.
Yeah. And
it's like, well, because it's fucking true.
Yeah.
Like, if you eat less and you exercise more, you will get more in shape. Like, it's just that basic. Yep. Right? And it's like, to all the people that like make all these excuses and, you know, have all these reasons for why they can't get in shape, and, you know, all of this stuff like, oh, it's genetic, oh, it runs in my family, oh, it's like blah 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 and this and that. And it's like, well, how do those fucking excuses actually help you?
Right.
Like, how does that help you get more in shape? Right? The alternative is that you accept that you are unfit right now, and you can work towards that, and you can become the person of your dreams, right? And that just takes accepting, you know, or accepting who you are today, and then looking forward to who you will become, rather than being satisfied with who you are today.
Right.
Those are very different.
Right. I agree.
It's sad. I think a lot. I think I see it a lot in society today, and I think that it's just sad to see unlocked potential. It really is.
I think people are more focused on whose fault it is than the actual state of things and how to fix it. It's way easier to say, oh, I don't even know the fucking mechanisms. I've got some thyroid issue, and that's why I'm not in shape.
Right.
Like, I don't digest microplastics in my food well.
And it's like, even if that's true,
clean it.
How does it help you?
Yeah.
How does it help your current situation? It doesn't change it.
If you're like, I can't digest the microplastics in the Kraft mac and cheese I eat every night, so instead I'm going to eat apples, then that's fine. I don't care what your reason is. If the outcome is an action of eating healthier, cool.
Right.
It doesn't matter. But
I think that dives into a little bit of, is intention behind communication as important as the effectiveness with which the communication is received? Like, is your intent in being blatantly honest with someone as important as how effective you portray it, or, you know, what impact it has on the person for them to make a change in their life? What are your thoughts?
I think they're both important, but it's not as important.
What is not as important?
My intention. I think that the actual information is more important.
I agree.
I would prefer someone to understand what I'm saying and misinterpret my meaning than misunderstand what I'm saying and interpret my emotion correctly, because ultimately facts don't care about your feelings. And
right.
Neither do I.
Well, also, like, the effectiveness of your communication is the only thing that is the link between what you want to say and what you actually say.
Right.
And ultimately, communication is about letting someone else know what your thoughts are effectively.
Right.
Right. And so the effectivity of however you portray what you're trying to say is the ultimate, like, the staple point of communication.
Yep.
You know,
I think that the accuracy of information supersedes the emotion behind it in every instance of informational delivery, but not in jokes. So, like the retard thing that I spoke about earlier, right? The intention behind that is absolutely critical in understanding the joke. Because as a layman or as a stranger, if someone says the word retard, my girlfriend thinks it's malicious because it's a malicious word usually, right? And the intention behind it is very clear. But if I'm trying to explain to you a situation that's going on right now, I don't need you to understand how I feel about it. You just need to know what's happening, right? If I'm trying to relay information to you in a critical sense.
Have you ever had some bad situations where your intent was diverted from the effectiveness or what was actually portrayed, and it led to like a bad situation or an argument or something like that?
Like a misunderstanding?
Yeah, like a miscommunication.
I'm sure you and I have had some.
Definitely.
At one point, we were talking about like painting your bedroom or something. You got like super pissy.
Yeah, I remember that.
I think that you were assuming that I was like passing judgment on you or something. I couldn't remember. Yeah, you were. Yeah. It had been like 2 or 3 months and you hadn't painted the bedroom. And I was like, dude, let's just knock it out this weekend. And you were like, bro, fuck you. You think that I'm not working hard? And I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I was just like, let's paint the bedroom this weekend. So that's a great.
Totally. I jumped to assumptions and conclusions based off of like that one small interaction. Yeah. And just kind of ran with it.
Yeah. And that I think is fundamentally why clear communication is important, because poor communication represents gaps in information. And these gaps are susceptible to being filled with assumptions, which leads to the improper analysis of information and unnecessary judgment being passed. So in that situation, it's way easier from Sanders' perspective to think, dude, Mason seems to really be judging me hard right now. Why don't I ask him directly, hey, are you upset that I haven't painted this bedroom yet? It's been 3 months. Are you upset with me? And then I'll go, well, no, mate. Like, I just want to help you get it done. Like, do you want to do it this weekend? I'll help you. And then you go, oh, okay, he's not passing judgment. Like, it's okay to blatantly ask people. So there's a problem earlier this week. Someone's spreading rumors around the Cabo Bar community. And I heard a rumor about my girlfriend. And so I asked that person directly. I was like, hey, I heard this thing. Did you say it or where did you hear it from? And they were like, oh, I must have like, here's where I heard it from. I relayed that message, but I think I probably misinterpreted myself when I relayed the message. I did not mean that. And I was like, cool, thanks for being honest. I'll go talk to that person. So it's like, if you are making assumptions or passing judgment, it's way easier to just ask that person directly than to make that assumption.
I think that's a point for blatant honesty too. In terms of like communication, like that's a check in that box.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Absolutely. What about you?
There's definitely been times where I've had it on both sides of the aisle. I've had times where I felt like I was purposefully polite and I made someone feel like they could bother me all the time for anything. And then I've also had times where I was a little bit too honest and I felt like I hurt the person's feelings. And then it's a factor of, do I really care that I hurt their feelings or not? Right. Because ultimately I hold the belief that it's better to be honest and it's better to hurt someone's feelings and give them the opportunity to grow than to validate their feelings if they're wrong and if they don't help them. I didn't always hold that belief. I used to think that, oh, you just have to make the people around you feel good. But I've grown since that time. Definitely quite a few interactions at the Cabo Bar or with ex-girlfriends as well, that I've had that kind of situation. And I've kind of just resorted to just being honest. And then if someone has a problem with me, and then I'm like, that's cool. Like, all right, whatever. You know what I mean?
I think it's easier to just be yourself. And if somebody happens to feel a certain way, that's up to them. Like, I'm not doing it to make you feel a certain way. I honestly, and I don't mean to be mean, I don't care about how you feel enough to try and make you feel something.
Right. And I think that's respectable.
I think so.
Right. Like, that's a respectable character trait. I think it's more respectable than if you're purposefully polite all the time and trying to make everyone feel good, because then you're just jumping into their truths or their lies, whatever they're saying.
Right.
It doesn't even matter to you at that point. And like, fucking, what kind of friend is that?
And then you'll grow to resent them after a while because you're not being yourself. I'd rather be myself from day one and have you like me or not like me immediately than pretend to be someone I'm not.
Right. It's actually, this is a situation that I was just kind of a third-party listener into this, but there were 2 people at the Cabo Bar the other day, 2 girls, and they were talking about like outfits they're going to wear to, it was some event at another Cabo Bar. I'll keep it generic to just leave them out of it, but it was an event at another Cabo Bar, and they were wondering what they were going to dress up like because one of the girls was interested in some guy that was going that night, and so she wanted to look good so that, to kind of impress him and, make him notice her or whatever. And the girl that was trying to, pull this guy into her life and trying to get him interested in her she was not the best looking, to say the least, you know. Cool. And 90% of the reason she wasn't the best looking was because she did not care about her body or health at all. And, you know, this wasn't a person who was like on the fence of, you know, like, oh, if they just went to the gym for a few months, then they would be really good looking. They were like, it's going to take you a year to get into the shape that you want to be in.
Right.
Right. And the other friend, you know, the I guess the person who was not interested in trying to pull a guy at the event, she was trying to validate that the other person was like a 10 out of 10 and they were up to snuff and they were going to look good no matter what. And like they could wear this skimpy clothing and look nice and blah, blah, blah. And in my head, I was like, how does this help your friend? Like, how does you validating, you know, that they look good change the reality of how they look, right? Like if you were a true friend, I feel like you just go to them and be honest and be like, hey, I think you're a great person. You have an awesome personality. You are funny. You're charismatic. You know, you carry yourself well. We have to start going to the gym because other people don't portray you that way until they get to know you. Mm-hmm. And if you want to pull, you know, guys of the opposite sex into your life from a dating perspective, you have to be able to pull them in without having a 30-minute conversation for them to get to know your character, right? Yeah. Like you have to present yourself well. And I feel like that's the honest approach. And whether that upsets people or not, like, I don't really care. But that's the truth. And that's what a good friend would do, right? Like a good friend goes to a friend and is like, hey, you look like shit, but I know that you can get there. I can help you, but you got to do it yourself too. And this is why. Like, that's a good friend right there. That's an honest friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's way easier when you and your girlfriends are picking out an outfit for the night and you're trying to decide between the skimpy pink dress and the skimpy purple dress. It's way easier to say wear the purple dress than I think we should probably go to the gym for the next 12 months before going out again.
Yeah, it is.
That's way nicer.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
But that's the truth. And that's what would actually help people. And then that person would reap all the benefits of going to the gym, not just being more physically fit, more mentally fit, mental clarity, general health, longer life. Like, there are so many benefits to just being in shape, and you wash all of those out by just validating or trying to make them feel good in that moment. And I don't think that's what a true friend does.
Now, maybe that guy is into larger women and everything works out and they actually end up like falling in love or whatever. Maybe. But I think that the problem is you're setting someone up you're being overly optimistic when the likelihood is significantly lower.
Right.
And I think that makes the fall way harder when someone gets rejected because they thought they actually had a chance, which is why I like Alex Hormozy's perspective of just assume no one's going to help you and it's not going to work, and then try to outwork both of those things. So it's like, assume that you're fat and ugly and you don't have a good personality and this dude doesn't like you, and then go try to make it happen. Right. And if you stack all the cards against you that way, then you're like, fuck, dude, I got to put on a full face of makeup. I got to go to the gym every day for 12 months. And then I've got to pick a dress that looks nice. And then I've got to work on my personality. I got to work on my personal growth. I got to work on my interpersonal communication skills. And then I got to make sure that this dude is actually someone that I'm interested in, because I'm not just wanting him. I'm wanting to make sure that he's a good fit for me. Like, there's so much more that goes into it if you stack the cards against you. But that's a lot of work. It's way easier to just say, wear the purple dress.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Do you think by and large you communicate effectively with the people around you?
I think now I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's because I go with blatant honesty 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And I didn't always do that. I think I used to be a much worse communicator. I used to be a lot more emotional. And I used to anticipate what I played a lot of mental games in my own head of like, I have to tell this person something. Do I tell someone else first so that they hear about it before I get to them? Or do I just tell them directly? And then when I tell them directly, where do I tell them I heard it from? And when I do that, like, I'd play 4-dimensional chess in my head about the communication, like the actual action, and then the implication and the emotions behind it. And it was like real political chess in high school. And I got pretty good at it. And I enjoyed doing it at the time because it was like solving a social puzzle in my head. But over time, I have reprioritized, and how people feel is not a priority to me anymore. Now it's just what's the outcome. Yeah. And the solution to, I'm not really bothered by how people feel, is I have more authentic people in my life and I get more of my goals accomplished.
I think there's a lot of proof to the both of us communicating relatively effectively too, in that we are having a entire discussion about how to communicate effectively. Like we've been able to pull together, somewhere between 5 and 7 pages of what we do to communicate effectively with the people around us, how we implement it, how we practice it, what are mannerisms we look for, what we do in our day-to-day lives, how does that differ from situation to situation. Like, I think overall we communicate pretty effectively, although there are, obviously exceptions to the rule here and there. I would argue that most of those have probably been in the past when we weren't as matured or grown to the point that we are today.
Yeah, I don't think there's much miscommunication between you and I at this point. And miscommunication...
Yeah, definitely not between you and I. I think it's far and few between.
Yeah, miscommunication with other people, I think, oftentimes falls on passing assumptions and judgment without talking to us about it. Because we're pretty open books. Like, if someone comes up to me and asks me for my opinion on something, I'll tell them blanket. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'll just tell you whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what you know and don't know about me. But people are... It's not socially acceptable to go up and ask somebody what they think or feel about something, because that's confrontation, and people are all too often non-confrontational. And confrontation doesn't have to be aggressive or assertive, or direct doesn't have to mean aggressive. Direct can mean the simplest path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any techniques you use to kind of read different emotions on people, like when they're being super honest, or when you think that you should be a little bit more polite or kind of tippy-toe around them? Like, are there certain mannerisms that you read on other people to kind of get a gauge on how to go through the conversation?
Is this moving into segment 3, or is this...
It's still 2 for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have this written down as tippy-toeing.
Oh, I got you.
I don't think there's anybody I tippy-toe around anymore, just because I have recognized that if I am myself, unadulterated, and people don't understand me, they will just ask. So my mom is a good example of this. I used to not withhold information from my mom, but just not get into specifics because I know she won't understand. And now at this point, I'll make a statement and she'll be like, the fuck does that mean? And then she'll ask me, and then I'll explain it. And she'll be like, why do you think that way? And then I'll explain it. And that all comes from being blunt and being honest. Mm-hmm. So I don't find that there's anybody I have to really tippy-toe around, because I'm not trying to impress anybody, and I'm not trying to make anybody think I'm someone who I'm not. I think that it's far easier to just become the person I want to become than to try to trick other people that I am the person that I want to be without doing the work. What about you?
Yeah, fair enough. I still try to gauge how people are reacting to my communication. Mm-hmm. Like, if someone seems very off-put, and it doesn't seem like they're ready for an honest discussion, or it's just gonna put them in a really bad emotional state or whatever, then I'll kind of dial back a little bit. But I'm very careful to not stray away from my values and beliefs and what I feel. Like, I'll sooner exit the conversation, much sooner exit the conversation than I will to backtrack on what I think is right. So
I don't think I would ever backtrack on something I think is right unless I'm proven wrong.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
I think that people are really afraid of arguments and don't understand the difference between arguments and discussions, because I think the only difference between an argument and a discussion is emotion.
Yeah.
Because you and I can disagree about something, and if we speak about each of our perspectives and then don't agree and then respectfully bow out of conversation or move on to the next topic, that's a discussion. But if that exact same thing happens, but with insults and emotion, it's an argument.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree.
And the other day, after the retard conversation, Grace was like, I think that was our first argument. I was like, I don't think it was an argument, because I didn't get emotional. She got a little teary-eyed at certain points, but it wasn't ever yelling or insulting or anything. Mm-hmm. We were both pretty rational. And she was like, I guess that's a fair point. And I was like, I don't think we've argued yet. And she was like, I think that's a fair point. And so one of my personal goals is I don't really want to have arguments anymore, ever. They're not really effective. I'd rather have discussions.
Yeah. You get all riled up, and for what? How does that help you? You know what I mean?
Sometimes I get some sick burns out of it, but ultimately, it does. It's not productive.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, I hear you. You have anything to add on to section 2?
No, dude. Let's go to section 3. So section 3 I have titled is How to Receive Mannerisms Accurately. It's far too often that we send signals to people we're wanting to talk to, but that falls on deaf ears. Whether it be us trying to exit the conversation, help someone come to a realization, or let them know that their ideas have flaws. I think it's important that we understand how to recognize when other people are doing this to us. So what do you look for in other people as telltale signs that they're trying to send you a message or that they might mean differently than the words they're saying?
I look for eye contact quite a bit. Like if people are not making eye contact with me while they're talking, or it's like diverted eye contact, like they're kind of like everywhere a little bit, I'll be like, okay, they seem uncomfortable. If the person is leaned back from the conversation, like they don't really want to be there, I look for that. If I'm being like super honest with them, or I'm talking about a topic that could potentially be uncomfortable for that person, then maybe I'll shift the topic, or maybe I'll exit the conversation, something like that. Mm-hmm. I look for their voice, like how they're actually speaking. Are they speaking confidently? Are they kind of quiet and held back? Are they giving yes or no answers, or are they elaborating when I didn't ask them to elaborate? Not that that's a bad thing, just like, are they engaged? Right? Those are kind of the main heavy hitters that I look for with other people. Mm-hmm. But I'm careful to balance that with also not spending a ton of time in a conversation if I'm really busy with something else. Right? Like if I see them super engaged, I'll let the engagement ride out for like 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll pull myself out of the conversation because I don't want to get caught up in a 20, 30, 40-minute conversation about blank.
I kind of call that reading the room.
Yeah.
Like if they're busy and I'm interrupting them, I'm going to do it with the intention of I don't want to bother them for too long. I just want them to let them know that I appreciate them or whatever the conversation is. And I feel like all too often people will see people working and then go, oh man, we'll sit down and have a chat for an hour. It won't be a big deal. But like they're doing something, or like if it's a full bar, I'm not going to lock the bartender in a conversation for 15 minutes because they've got other shit to do.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that.
This is especially relevant on like weekends because we work on weekends, right? Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. And a lot of people don't do anything. Like they come to a cover bar specifically to chat with new people.
Right.
And so we end up getting caught up in conversations that we have to find a way out of frequently. Mm-hmm. And, that's all good and dandy. I like talking with new people. I like chatting it up. But at the end of the day, like those are my 2 days of like completely dedicated work time where I don't have anything else going on other than what I want to do, which is my laptop work.
Yeah.
So it's really important to me to, prioritize my time and make sure that I value my weekends as much as I can to get as much as I can done.
I think what bothers me more than people distracting me from work, because that doesn't super bother me unless I've got my earbuds in and I'm in a super flow state and like I'm leaned forward. You've seen that meme where he's sitting back in the chair and then he leans forward. Mm-hmm. If I'm lean forward working and you come over and you're like, hey man, dude, how's your week been? Then I'm like, dude, okay, read the room. But if I'm sitting there, I don't have my earbuds in and I'm kind of like looking around, I'm not super paying attention, maybe I'm brainstorming and someone comes over and says something to me, I'll engage in a 5-minute conversation. I don't mind. It doesn't happen super often. What really bothers me is if you and I are standing really close to each other looking at the same laptop screen and we're like talking about like cars or something, like something that you and I both enjoy, like we're taking a brief moment to take a break from work to enjoy something together. And then someone comes over and they're like, oh man, dude, is that one of the 5.8 liter Mustangs? And I'm like, go away. I don't want to talk to you. Because if I'm busy working, I'll speak directly and be like, hey man, great to see you. I'm kind of busy working right now, so like I'll get back to you later, but have a good night. But if someone comes over and I'm already having a break, I feel rude turning to them and being like, this is a private conversation, you need to leave.
Yeah.
Because it's not, but it is, Right. It's like, don't bother me. It's like, if you are taking up my work time, I get it. I'm working in a public environment. But if I'm having a break and you come on, interrupt my break and you were uninvited, that drives me nuts. There are certain people who, if they stop by and they're like, hey guys, how you doing? All right, cool. And then they keep going. That's the best way to do it. If you want to engage in some conversation with Sander and I while we're like having fun or whatever, come just say hello. And then if we ask you how you're doing and how your day is going, that's a sign to initiate the conversation. I feel like all too often people butt into a conversation and try to become a part of it without first subliminally asking if they're welcome.
Yes.
That's a great one. I just thought of that live. Because I'll go over to people, I'll be like, hey, like Tyler and Kay. I'll be like, hey guys, how's your day going? And they're like, awesome. And I'm like, awesome. And then they're like, how was your day? And I'm like, oh, okay, we'll have a conversation. But otherwise, my intent is they don't want to see me and they don't want to talk to me. So I'll just say hello to let them know that I'm here. And then if they want to talk, they'll reach out. And like, it's kind of like I reach my hand out. And then if they don't reach their hand back out, I'm like, sounds good. And if they do, then we're in conversation. And people don't do that. People walk up to us and they're like, bro,
Because everyone assumes that whatever they're doing that day is what the people around them are doing that day too. Because we're all in the same space at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's just like not usually true.
Right. It really bothers me when we're looking at car stuff. Like when we're talking about a specific car and someone comes up and they're like, bro, I had a Firebird in high school. It's like, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like, I'm taking a small break to like bro out with my friend and I don't need to be doing. But anyways, some telltales that I look for in people, honestly, I don't notice this in many people because I think I am usually the person cutting off conversation. I don't tend to have conversations with people who don't want to talk to me just inherently because I'm not interested in speaking to people who don't want to talk to me.
Yeah,
but
that's fair enough.
Signals that I send is vagueness. If someone's speaking in vague terms, and by someone I mean me, they either don't want to share other people's information, they don't want to let their true thoughts show, or they aren't really certain what's going on. And in any case, I'll usually ask for specifics through blatant honesty, and truly try to understand exactly what's going on. And if they're unwilling to give me back that information, it's either not their information to share, or they don't really know what's going on, or it is their information and they don't want to share it. And either way, I can pick up on that and change the topic or excuse myself from conversation. Yeah. So when people come up to me and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, working. They're like, all right, sounds good. But if someone's like, what are you working on? I go, I can't really talk about it. Like I signed an NDA. And then they go, oh, can you give me hints? And I'm like, no, dude, read the room at that point. Another one is sarcasm. My general rule is if they don't smile at least once throughout the entire conversation, there's probably some truth behind the jokes. So if someone's calling somebody a retard, but they're fucking serious, they probably don't like people with mental disabilities. But if they're lighthearted and joke about it, then maybe it's sarcasm, and then it's okay. So like all the Chase's mom jokes that we make about gagging on Chase's mom, we smile at sarcasm. I'm not actually railing her that hard. The last one is questions. If someone is answering my questions but not asking very many, I can quickly tell that they are not interested in the conversation and would not oppose me excusing myself. And I'll send this message. If you and I are having a conversation and I'm answering your questions and not asking you any, please leave.
Yeah.
Usually. Sometimes I'm brain dead and can't think of anything to say.
It's crazy how many people don't read that, though.
You go,
It's like, oh my God. I've tried just like not even saying anything. And there are certain people that would just come up with things to talk about to themselves. And I'm like not even inputting into the conversation. And I'm like, how can you not see this? How can you not see this?
I just remembered a conversation I had once. Dude, Shaw and I were building the Lexus. And we changed the differential to be from a GS 400 because it had a higher final drive. And we were buying it from some dude in another city. And we had to drive to that city. We met him in like a Home Depot parking lot. He had a truck, and we had a 1980 Cressida wagon that we were going to put it in the back of, right? Drove like 3 hours out there. We meet him in the parking lot. He's like, here it is. And we're like, all right. So we spin the input shaft and like the outputs move. And we're like, sounds good. So we load it in the Cressida. And we're like, here's your money. He's like, thanks, guys. And he takes the money. And then he's like, when I had this car, he then started to speak and did not pause to take a breath long enough for me to interject any word for 96 minutes. I timed it. This conversation jumped from cars to airplanes to how he wants to, if the zombie apocalypse happens, take over a cruise ship because as soon as you eradicate the zombies, you've got a ton of food and you can have your own water filtration system. And he bets he can learn how to drive a cruise ship. And he's been on a cruise before and he saw the bridge. Dude, it went on for 96 minutes. And ultimately, I just got in the car. Like, I didn't even have an opportunity to say anything. Like, I just got in the car and started it. And then started backing up, and then Shaw got in the car too. He's like, awesome, well, it's time to go. Dude, I got sunburned from that conversation in the parking lot. It was horrific. We didn't ask a single thing. We didn't interject. Zero input. And this dude just started talking and like kept going. I don't know what fucking
like that too. I don't fucking understand how they don't get a hint. It's not even a hint at that point. At like 10 minutes, it's not a hint anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking painful. But these people don't understand. And that drives me insane. And I don't want to be that person to someone else. So if I'm ever having a conversation with somebody, I'm paying attention to these indicators. And if they're feeding me those indicators, I'm like, I should wrap it up and bow out. And I have before.
Yeah.
There's been several conversations, specifically with Tyler, if he's busy doing something. Like, I can see he's checking his phone every once in a while. So I wrap it up. I'm like, great talking to you, bud. And then I go do my thing.
Yep.
Busy people understand busy people are busy.
Right. 100%.
And I feel like a lot of people aren't. They're not busy, so they don't understand that busy people are busy.
You said you had a story to dive into, right?
I got a long one. I also have an instance in which I did not interpret sarcasm correctly.
Oh, got it.
I think you might have been there. There was a beach party a while back, and our pregnant friend made a joke about aborting their baby. And we laughed about it because we both knew that she would never do that. So it's a joke. And then she got serious and told me that they were going to put it up for adoption. And I didn't know what to say because I've never had a kid before. So I congratulated her. And then still serious, she was like, we're not putting it up for adoption. And then I was like, oh, okay. And the way that I said it made it sound like I was disappointed that they weren't. I freaked out. I panicked. I had no idea what the fuck to say. I just congratulated her on giving up her firstborn kid. Like, I was stuck. And I fucked that one up really bad. And then I talked to her afterwards and I was like, listen, dude, I've never been caught out in a conversation like that before. I totally misread your vibe. And we laughed about it, but I didn't understand the sarcasm there. Maybe I'm autistic. And then also every interaction with every girl from ages 20 all the way back to when I was 12. Gents, she's just not into you. Carry on. That's the best way to go about it. Just assume they don't like you unless they directly say otherwise, and carry on bettering yourself. Who fucking cares?
Yeah.
At this point, I try to speak blatantly with everybody, try to be honest, regardless of who they are. I would really like to think that I would speak to a person of historical significance like Elon Musk the same way I would to just John Smith, Jimmy Short Dick off the street.
Yeah. Standing by your values and beliefs.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. I have a story, and I think that it's semi-relevant.
Sure.
It's an Alex Hormozi story. I'm sure you know it. I got this from his Twitter. So this is from Alex Hormozi's perspective. When I was 19 years old, I pledged a fraternity, and I learned one of the most important lessons of my life on how to deal with women and others. Here's some context. So, when you're a pledge, you have to drive drunk brothers around. You are the designated driver. One night, I was driving an older brother home. The guy always pulled smoke shows, just 10s. So I was driving silently, and in the rearview mirror, I could see yet another 10 was drooling all over him. Everything was fine until she started complaining that he had a lip in. That's tobacco, like chewing tobacco. And that it was gross. She said, it's gross, spit it out, so nasty, whatever, etc. She even tried to egg me on, saying, tell him it's gross. But I stayed silent. This continued for a minute. She kept trying to reach for his mouth to pull it out, and then he stared at me through the rearview mirror. He spit in his cup, keeping the dip in his mouth, and said, Hormozi, listen up. Life lesson. This girl is more attracted to the fact that I didn't give a fuck what she thinks more than she's turned off by the fact that I dip. Watch. He then proceeded to make out with her, and she seemed happily to oblige. Now, I'm sure you can take this in a lot of ways, but I'll tell you what I took from it. Don't conform. Sure, maybe I'd look better in a suit, or I should do the things to look better, but it wouldn't be me. At the end of the day, someone pretending to be someone they're not is never going to be as formidable as someone who's grounded in their identity. So whenever I feel tempted to conform, I just remember that lesson. People are more attracted to someone who is themselves than someone who bends the knee to society's demands. And the older I got, the less patience I had for anyone who wanted to change me. And for a young man who was trying to figure out who they were, it was a lesson that forever shaped how I interacted with the world. And that's why I say the word retard.
It's interesting that you bring up that story because I was listening to, it was like a TikTok thing or something like that the other day. But it was talking about relationships and how to have a healthy relationship, the man has to be respected in the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And the man gains respect by staying true to his values and what he believes. Because a woman who doesn't respect a man won't stay with that man, right? And so I think that kind of goes along with that story. It's like if standing your ground on issues and having good values and sticking to them is an attractive quality, not just from like a dating perspective or like a relationship perspective, but just with the people around you. Yep. Like that is someone who is strong in their beliefs, who is respectable, and who is, just you can count on that person to be true to who they are. Like, when they are talking, they are saying what they truly believe. Yeah. And I think that's a really important quality and something that not enough people have in the world around us. Yeah. But yeah, great story. Great story. I heard something similar about, this was on a podcast for sure. The podcast host was talking about his wife and how his wife always nags him about the clothing he wears. Mm-hmm. And she wants him to wear like a suit and stuff like that. And he just always wears like shorts and a t-shirt because that's what he likes. It was something like that. And he was talking about how, although his wife always nags him about like not wearing a suit and stuff like that, she actually enjoys when he wears what he wants to wear more than what when he wears what she wants him to wear.
Right.
Which is an interesting perspective. It just, standing your ground and holding your values is very respectable and it's attractive.
Yeah. I think an ideal relationship has respect both ways, which is interesting because in that scenario, when you go out as a couple, you don't care what the other person wears because you just are happy to be out there with that person. Because at the end of the day, the only reason that you wear specific clothing is because you want to be perceived a certain way from other people. And that's not something that I have interest in. And I don't really want to be with someone else who has that interest.
Yeah.
Type thing.
Fair enough.
Do you have anything else?
No.
All right, let's dial in. We like to end every podcast with a quote to think about for the week to come. We've talked about a lot today. We've covered a lot of different topics, a lot of good value in it. But we like to, instead of leaving you scatterbrained with a lot to think about, just sum it up in one quote and get back into work. So my quote today is from Chris Williamson. And this kind of goes along with the not passing assumptions of people. If you don't have all the information, don't pass an assumption. Just assume that you don't know and then try and find the answer. Because assumption is judgment and judgment is an opinion. Chris Williamson's quote is this: resist the desire to have an opinion on everything. Your expertise is narrower than you think, and the world needs more signal, not more noise. Thanks for listening.
See you next week.